people who've seen nice people finally snap? What happened? This woman, Mary, I worked with was always pleasant and cheerful, said hello in the lunchroom, and was generally liked. She worked in finance and special projects. She said she wanted to retire in a few years, and she'd been working there for 15 years. Her boss started pressuring her to complete our annual budget report faster, but this thing is huge and comprehensive and a figurative beast. Mary told the boss it would be ready in a couple of weeks, per the usual schedule. The boss said it needed to be completed within 1 week to give to the higher-ups. Mary said it wasn't possible. Boss emailed Mary, plus CC'd a bunch of coworkers and the assistant managers, calling Mary out for a poor work ethic and for making the department look bad. Mary said it wasn't possible and didn't appreciate being bullied. She put in her notice to retire by the end of the week, leaving her boss high and dry. She was the only one who could do the budget report in a timely manner, so the department was double effed. Good for her. Story 2. A long time ago, I used to do a call center tech support for fairly complex issues. A really nice, quiet guy went through the same training class. He talked if you talked to him, but never went out of his way to chat. Right after training, the call center changes a ton of stuff. We start getting squeezed on the amount of time we can do documentation, how much research time we have, just metrics in general. It was utter bullcrap, because the favorites got to go on smoke breaks as often as they wanted with the managers. We'd essentially be punished for that because we had to keep the average numbers in a certain area. He did all the right things. Talked to his manager, talked to their manager, then to HR. It kept getting worse, plus enforced overtime. Then he got a super long call. He was on it at least 2 hours, about a complex issue, and the customer was just straight up abusing him, but he had to take it because the managers wouldn't give permission for him to hang up. And they were basically screaming at him to resolve this issue and get to his next call. But we couldn't end calls. The customer had to. One day, he just stood up, stepped onto his chair, then onto his desk, threw his headset on the desk, and sort of growled something like, "F this," quietly. He looked around, staring people in the face, especially the people who took those long breaks in the managers. Then he walked out and no one ever saw him again. Everyone was super quiet and afraid to move or say much of anything. Story 3. I used to manage a pub in a small rural town, population around 300 in Australia. Running the pub was mostly a business of maintaining the peace between the itinerant oil and gas workers and the local cattle industry families who resented their presence. The flashpoint for this conflict was frequently the jukebox in the bar. The oil and gas guys were usually city folks on fly-in, fly-out rotations, so their musical tastes somewhat differed to the locals. Anyway, so there's a guy we'll call Brian, who's the heir apparent to one of the larger cattle empires in the district. Super cool guy, everyone liked him, would give you the shirt off his back sort of thing. Brian had a daughter who'd just married and was pregnant with her first kid. Sometime during the pregnancy, she'd noticed a dodgy-looking blemish on her butt, though she figured she'd wait till she had the kid to get it looked at. Months later, she's had the kid, goes to get it checked. Skin cancer, metastasize everywhere, weeks to live. There's a huge funeral. Brian is destroyed. At the end of the church service, there's a procession of vehicles out to the cemetery. Some Halliburton truck, impatient to be caught behind it, plows down the side of the road and spews dust over the whole thing. From then on, Brian would be down the pub every other night. He'd get half smashed, then put that effing If I Die song on the jukebox that was popular like 10 years back. Man was circling the drain, but nobody really knew what to do about it. Anyway, one night, Brian's at the bar and the song is on the jukebox. Some guys in Halliburton patched high V's start bickering about the song choice. I tell them to just leave it be, but one of them gets up and unplugs the jukebox. Brian plugs it back in and puts the song on again. One of the Halliburton guys calls Brian a depressing old idiot. Brian tells him to get effed, and, well, I don't remember who threw the first punch. But between the fight starting and the couple of seconds it took me to break it up, Brian did enough damage to put the guy in an ambulance. Edit. For those wondering how this all turned out for Brian, there was no trouble with the police because the town didn't even have a police officer at the time, and the gas worker couldn't have his boss knowing he'd been brawling with the locals at the pub. I haven't lived out that way for a couple years, but last I heard, Brian was still running the family cattle stations and de facto raising his granddaughter because the son-in-law works FIFO. 3 on and 1 off. Story 4. When I was in high school, my group of like 6 friends were sitting around at a table in the cafeteria for breakfast. A table over, some girls had been tossing small chunks of their food in our direction. My one friend, M, wore her hair in an unusual spiked up style, and I guess the girls at the table were trying to land food in her hair while cackling to themselves. Cue my quiet, sweet, introverted friend, Kay, getting so angry I swear steam was coming out of her ears. One of the girls had thrown a decent-sized piece of egg patty at us, and it landed on the floor near Kay's foot. Kay proceeded to step on the egg patty, pick it up off the ground, walk over to the table of bullies, and shove the egg directly into the mouth of the one who had thrown it. This was such an amazing moment in my high school memory. I couldn't believe what I was seeing, as Kay was the last person I would have expected to do that. Of course, she did get in trouble, but she didn't regret it one bit. Yeah, so it's always funny when the shy, subdued one, just when they finally snap, they totally fly off the handle. This is hilarious, shoving the egg right back into her mouth. Get some. Story 5. Back in 5th grade, I was super lucky to have the elementary school's favorite teacher. Every single student loved her. My class was always super loud and annoying. We were working on some assignment before PE, and everyone was passing her off. She was only allowing students to go out if they finished the assignment. My slow ass was unfortunately one of the last kids in the room. This one student, who was a god-awful and annoying crapbag kid, was being way over the top. My teacher got up, put her hands over her ears, and just started screaming, "Shut the F up! Just shut up! Shut up! Shut up!" And she just stomped out of the room, still screaming with her hands covering her ears. All of us just sat there in horror. A couple of kids just left to go to PE, and I sat there just trying to finish the assignment. Our principal came into the room a few minutes later, just telling the rest of us to go out to PE, but she made the crapbag kid stay in the room with her. She was moved into the other 5th graders' room after this. She was completely normal and fine after coming back, and there was nothing else that went wrong for the rest of the year. Just worked her ass off and made all of us love her by her caring soul and all that fun stuff. But that moment completely traumatized me. Story 6. A lady where I used to work was subjected to constant sexual harassment by a much older coworker, and the company failed to do anything about it. He was showing up at her house, eventually forcing her to move houses. After she moved into the new house, he bought the house next door. She arrived to work with a baseball bat and stopped at reception to ask if Tom was in. When they asked why, she calmly told them she was there to kill him. She walked upstairs to his office, reception called ahead, and had him take the fire escape, and she instead demolished his office until the police arrived. She was not charged. The company and police knew she had announced her intentions to reception as a cry for help, so she didn't actually find him, because it was clear that if she had found him, she would have killed him. She took some sick leave and eventually returned to work, and the company put her on a project with a guy as her manager, because F protecting victimized women, right? Okay, certainly not making light of the harassment side of this, but death threats just swept under the rug? I don't really understand that. Oh, I'm here to kill him. Okay, yeah, he's right upstairs. Then you radio to the guy, "Hey, there's this woman here that's here to kill you. You may want to take the fire exit." What the hell? Story 7. One of my middle school friends, whom we'll call Bob, was about a half foot shorter than everyone else. Everyone was around 5 feet. He was an interesting, in a good way, dude. Interested in learning, played video games, was great to hang out with. But he looked scrawny. Didn't look like he could hurt anything, if I'm being honest. For some context to the story, our gym teacher was an a-hole. Gave nicknames, some good, some bad, to everyone. He was always sarcastic, always berating everyone, speaking down to us instead of encouraging them. One day, the gym teacher says something about Bob's mom, which Bob's mom had fibromyalgia and some other conditions making her weak and unhealthy, not by choice. And something in Bob snapped. Bob completely took down his 6.5-foot monster gym teacher. Gym teacher looked like he stood no chance at that time. They were quickly pulled apart and Bob got expelled and had to move schools while the gym teacher was fired for fighting a student and being an overall a-hole. Story 8. There was a kid at my school in about 7th grade. His name was Frederick. He was loved by everyone. He was so nice and donated to charity regularly. Everyone knew him and respected him. One day, a new kid came to our school. We'll name him Josh. Josh was a big douche. He hit people, pushed them around, threw food at people during lunch, just honestly a big ass. Well, one day, he decided to pick on Fred by doing his normal crap, and Frederick just went ballistic, punching, screaming, kicking. They were both suspended for 2 to 3 days. After their suspension, they both came back and Josh had a black eye, bruises on his arms and left leg, and he looked awful. Josh thought everyone would start to hate Fred after what he did to him. But nope. Everyone was tired of his crap and picked on him for how bad he looked. Fred was just loved more for this incident, though he told me he got grounded for a week. Edit. Some people are asking how he donated to charity regularly. I meant he and his family did volunteer work, like fundraisers, and his parents always donated to charity about twice every month. Story 9. Freshman and sophomore year, the same kid gave me crap at the bus stop and the whole walk home. Every single day, non-stop harassment, just kept needling me constantly. So many people asked me why I took it, but I was just really shy and passive at that age. I stayed quiet and didn't react. One day, the kid tried to push me into some bushes thinking it'd be funny. He'd never gotten physical before. I grabbed his wrist and put him on his ass. He went down on his back, and when he tried to get up, I put the past 2 years into a single punch that put him right back down. Next day in school, kid had the darkest black eye I've ever seen. He wasn't at the stop for the next few days, and when he started taking it again, he never said another word. I shocked a bunch of people, but it turns out lots of other kids hated this guy and were jealous I gave him what he had coming. It did a lot of good for me, and the positive reaction kind of helped me come out of my shell. 10 out of 10, would punch again. Story 10. In junior high, there was this girl named Rachel. Quiet but popular, never messed with anybody, never said an ill thing about another person. One day, she was leaving art class and accidentally bumped into another girl. The other girl took offense to this and just started fighting with Rachel. Rachel wasn't effing playing that day. Rachel took those first few blows and kept taking a few more until she beat the ever-loving crap out of the other girl. But wait, there's more. The girl Rachel was fighting had a twin, and all of a sudden you hear, "Not my effing sister, female dog," and she starts wailing Rachel in the back of the head. Big mistake. Rachel basically has Sister 1 in submission and turns around and gives Sister 2 the same treatment her sibling just received. The quiet, nice girl just took on twins and beat their effing asses. Well, it was the most glorious thing I saw in junior high school, other than Sarah's wet t-shirt when we had an R&R day, lol. I hate seeing people get jumped, or in this situation, try to jump somebody, so this was justice. I wish we had cell phones back then. Story 11. An acquaintance of mine, Daryl, was always a quiet kid that bothered nobody. Given that he was 6'5" and 250 pounds, he played football and was generally respected and liked. One day in Spanish class, the class clown was making his usual rounds talking crap, until he got to this one girl, Nellie. He never really made fun of people of the other sex, so everyone around him was telling him to F off, but he kept going and finally got to the birthmark on her neck that was very large and dark red. He told her that it, quote, dropped her a few numbers down. At this point, just about everyone and their grandma in the class was standing up about to rush him, save for Daryl and a few others, until Daryl got up, waltzed over to the class clown, picked him up by his hair, and said, and I quote, "If you don't shut the F up right now, I'm going to put you through that effing wall," points to the nearest wall. He dropped the clown and walked away. A few seconds later, with his band of merry men behind him, the clown tries to jump Daryl in the middle of the class. Daryl then proceeds to elbow him across the room, run over, pick him up by the shoulder, and put his hand through the drywall next to the clown's head. Security by this point was called, and both Daryl and the clown were arrested, with both only getting off with fines for damages. Every day, the spackle patch where the hole used to be humbles me every day. Story 12. I consider myself a nice, friendly guy, and I'm pretty quiet. So I was dating this girl, and it turned out my friends, who I consider even friendlier than I, BF, dated this person as well, and my friend told me that she was a really toxic person. It didn't bother me too much, as I'm one of those people that don't want to judge people based off of others' opinions. But about a month or two into the relationship, I started to see what my friend was talking about. So a few days later, I broke up with her. In the following days, she started crap-talking me and started spreading rumors about me and my friend. My friend's BF heard these rumors and broke up with her, so we were both pretty pissed about the situation. 3 days later, my friend caught her ex kissing my ex and confronted them. She was relatively chill about it. It's not like he was really cheating, but it hurt either way. She was about to leave, but my ex said, quote, "It probably hurts you more to know I was doing him while you were dating." My friend slowly turns around and asks her to repeat herself. My ex happily obliged. Worst mistake of her life. My friend jumped onto her and started beating the crap out of her, even ripping out some of her hair. When she was done with her, she went up to her ex and said, "You want to cheat on me, that's fine, but you can get your crap beat with her." Slapped him and kicked him in the nuts. We still talk about this today. Story 13. A guy I knew freshman year was super chill. We'll call him James. He was the guy that if you didn't like him or picked on him, everyone just hated you. So one day, this absolute douche of a junior who thought he was so tough because he was just just older than him, was just being a douche and picking on a group of freshmen for literally nothing. So James did the appropriate thing and stepped and told the junior to knock it off. Now, James wasn't a very big dude, maybe 5'6" and 120 maybe, give or take, and the junior was about 5'11" and 190, a fairly large difference. So this junior dude is acting all tough and being a douche like usual, and James just sucker punches this dude in the stomach and proceeds to rock this dude's crap. The junior goes to the hospital and had a broken arm, 3 broken ribs, and a pretty messed up face. Nobody really bothered to ask James why he was able to beat this dude up so bad, but bottom line is, we all became very scared of James. Story 14. I met this guy named Duke in middle school once, just so sweet and humble. Dumb as dirt, but a really great guy. He's always been admirably respectful towards everyone he's met, and he always owns up to everything he gets involved with. One day, we were walking down an empty hall when all of a sudden, this gang rounded the corner and started harassing us. It was fine at first, though, with some people name-calling, prodding, homophobic taunting, etc. Just the usual bullying. Then, out of nowhere, one of them grabs Duke from behind and locks him in a hold, leaving me exposed to get surrounded. I was backed into a set of lockers and SA'd. That's when it happened. He must have blacked out, because I had to tell him what happened. First, he kicked the one guy's knee, which he wound up breaking. Then he went into a full martial arts frenzy, like something straight out of a Bruce Lee movie, breaking even more bones in the process. In the end, the gang got a full month suspension, and they were put in detention for the rest of the school year, as well as held back for another year. Duke was put in the kitchen to help serve lunch for the rest of the year, which is something he already did. I was scouted by another guy, someone pretty big and popular, and was offered protection, which I begrudgingly accepted. To this day, we're still best friends. I've never met a better pro. Sorry if this is too long. I just felt the need to add as much detail as I possibly could. Story 15. I used to be really shy and quiet. As a single daughter of a single working mother, it was hard to socialize with people my age when everyone around me was 6 to 10 years older than me. This happened around 97 to 98. My mom decided to put me in private school. It was the biggest change in my life, as this kid's knew about computers, music, and English. I'm from Mexico, and I just knew the essentials of everything since I came from public schools. The first weeks were a nightmare, since this girl decided to make fun of me, my skin. I was a lot darker. I was a Prytida, and this girl was white. And my accent. These kids didn't have the region's accent, for whatever reason. Things continue like that, and every day I felt sadder and lonelier, until one day I just snapped. I started being friends with a girl that liked some of the same cartoons I did. Dragon Ball, Pokemon, etc. And my bully didn't like that I wasn't letting her bully me. One day, she decided to poke me with her pencil while we were in class, since I was just too shy to say anything when there was a teacher. She continued to poke me until the teacher had to get out for something, so I just grabbed her pencil and threw it away. We started to fight in the middle of the classroom while everyone was either cheering, trying to stop us, or getting out to get the teacher. She ended up pinching, scratching, and hitting me, but she never expected me to actually fight back, and fight back dirty. I grabbed her hair, punched her stomach, and bit her. I went full chola, lol. I don't remember what happened or how I avoided getting expelled, but 2 weeks later I was in recess eating my lunch and talking happily with my best friend when all of a sudden she just came to us, handed me a bag of Cheetos, pizza flavor, and we never spoke about it again. Story 16. I was that kid. I was the nice guy. I grew up poor and matured slower physically than everyone else. I had to be a nice guy because if I screwed up, my dad would literally beat the crap out of me. I was used to getting in fights with my dad and getting hit hard. In 8th grade, I kept getting picked on by a big, popular, athletic, rich, cocky, cool kid. I never retaliated or stuck up for myself, not out of fear from him or his friends, but that I'd get beat up by my dad. One day, the cool kid made a comment about my mom. Usually it was about me. This was different. My mom was the one person I could count on to be nice to me. It broke me on the inside. I was still a little guy and much smaller than him, but had been in so many fights with my dad by that age that his punches felt like girl slaps. I effing demolished the kid. I remembered being pulled off the kid while pounding the side of my fist against his face hammer style. When I looked back, he was still on the ground, not moving. I unleashed years of child abuse on that poor kid's face. I feel bad now for what I did. My dad never found out, and the cool kid never said another word to me either. Story 17. Was in Boy Scouts a few years back at summer camp. There was a Boy Scout in my troop who was basically a giant teddy bear. Him and his whole family are the nicest, sweetest people you'll ever meet. We'll call him James. Anyway, there was this a-hole kid who loved to F with everyone's crap. We'll call him Chad. One of the days during summer camp, James made a boat out of wood. He brought it back to our campsite after the day was over. He was sitting with Chad and some other scouts, including myself. Chad began to mess with James, asking to see his boat. James allowed him to see it. Chad demanded to hold the boat, and James said no. Chad began messing with James even more, trying to snatch the boat from him. Then Chad managed to grab the boat. James grabs him by the waist, picks him up, and sends him effing crashing into the table. James began to cry while smiling. We basically bullied Chad out of the troop after that. It was glorious. Story 18. So this story is from the time I was in high school, 2 years ago to be exact. Our group had this guy, we'll call him N. He was pretty popular and everyone liked him. He was the perfect blend of jock and nerd. You want to break up a fight? You call N. You want someone to play the piano for your musical? You call N. You want help with mathematics or physics? You call N. You want a midfielder for the football, soccer team? You call N. You want to talk to someone? You call N. So we were in the mess when a guy, let's call him A, started teasing our friend P because of how fat and ugly she was. A and his friends were laughing, passing comments all around. N told P to ignore the BS. Then A and his friends started throwing paper bits and food at us. N told A to quit it. I didn't listen and told P that her father left because he couldn't stand how ugly she was. This was pretty much the last straw. N got up, grabbed A, and threw him against the wall like a bag. A's friends got up and N punched both of them in the face, and one of them ended up with a bloody nose. N went back to A and laid it to him, at least 10 to the face. It was at this time that me and my friends could separate them. A ended up with a 1-week suspension and 2 broken teeth. N also got a 1-week suspension, but his mother told us she's proud of him when she invited all of us for dinner. She even told P that she was going to the school with P's mom to talk to the principal about this matter. All in all, N and his family are the most wholesome people I've ever met. Story 19. My friend did everything for what had been her childhood best friend, dedicated her entire future to being with her and helping her stay on track. But that friend was incredibly toxic, constantly complaining about what were indeed crappy circumstances, but to a point of excess and exaggeration that became self-consumed. Constantly complain about how unfair everyone was and how insecure she was. One day, that toxic friend decided to cut everyone off to hang out with more popular kids, who were in reality just the weird incel type of gamer boys. But since she was one of those not like other girls, she didn't see this. My friend, as gentle and quiet and wonderful as she is, finally snapped. When my friend inevitably came crawling back, she didn't respond, and instead joked and crap-talked her to me. It was the first time I had seen her genuinely upset and display anything besides a calm humor. Story 20. I take my cat to a vet who also has 100 cats living at the clinic. Some of them are just unsociable, some are blind or have other horrible handicaps, and the clinic is basically hospice care for still others. Long story short, the doctor and her staff and volunteers are all saints. Unfortunately, word has gotten out that some people now think of the clinic as the place where you can dump unwanted cats, which they really can't. It's already at capacity. Anyhow, I'm waiting there one day for a routine checkup, and this Kardashian-looking woman, covered with jewelry and expensive clothes, walks in with a perfectly healthy-looking cat. She tells the woman behind the counter, "I'm leaving town. I can't take the cat, so I'm donating it to you guys." The employee explains that no, that's not a sweater in your hands, and this isn't goodwill. It doesn't work that way. Oblivious to her surroundings, there are maybe a dozen people there, between patient, parents, and staff. The visiting woman isn't even making an effort to talk discreetly. After being refused, she says, "Fine, if you don't take the cat, I'm just going to dump it on the street." She has a brief stare down with the woman behind the counter, maybe assuming that she can guilt the clinic into taking her cat, then walks away. Another customer, a big beefy guy, who's been watching this, intercepts the woman before she can get to the door, and proceeds to say something so vivid I wish I could repeat it verbatim, but I can paraphrase it with some highlights. "Lady, you want to dump the cat? Fine, I'm going to give you what you want. I'll take your cat. But the price is that I'm going to berate you in front of everyone else, you useless effing idiot. You're so goddamn selfish you won't even cough up 69 cents a day for a can of Friskies? F you, you effing whore. You don't effing deserve the generosity of the people who work here. You want to effing blackmail them into preventing a cat murder? You disgust me. If it wasn't for that gold-plated private parts dripping between your legs, I'd punch you in the orbital sockets until your eyes bleed. Now get the F out of my sight before I decide that it'd be worth a battery charge to do it anyway. F you. This was R. Lee Emery level crap. By now, the doctor herself has shown up. She doesn't know exactly what's happening, but it's gotten pretty loud. Obviously, she doesn't like people swearing at other people in her waiting room. It's bad for business. The guy says to her, "Look, you're probably used to it, but I get angry when I see people who mistreat animals." Hey, everybody has a very specific trigger that will just set you off out of nowhere, so, maybe a little overboard with the threats and insults, but it sounds like this lady needed a nice slice of humble pie, so I'm here for it. Story 21. My brother was a sweet kid, emphasis on sweet, in elementary school. This was early 2000s. He was probably 8 at the time. Anyway, he did wrestling and baseball to pass time, but generally was a pretty average kid. He was smart and had a good amount of friends from the sports he played. Nothing special, though there was one kid who bullied him a lot. For no reason, really. The bully's name was Garrett, but they would call my brother names and hide pencils/pens to get him yelled at in class. Well, one day Garrett, for some odd reason, decided to literally slap my brother in the face with a school lunch, like a piece of pizza or something. Chicken fried steak, maybe? My brother got up, picked him up by his shirt, and slammed him to the floor, proceeding to break the kid's nose and maxillae, upper jaw below the nose. After that, everyone called him Garrett the Ferret because he had to have his mouth wired shut. Fast forward a few years, and I was being bullied, and Garrett actually stood up for me. I don't know if he got his crap together or was just afraid of someone bullying me, knowing how my brother handles things. Story 22. This is actually my story, which I've told in parts before. So, me and this guy were friends in high school, but because basically inseparable from the end of junior year to graduation. We hung out a lot until I moved 4 hours away for college. He started doing pot in high school, and I tried it but didn't see the hype. Gradually, he started doing more and more shady things. We had a well-established bro code in our friend group, and all agreed on the rules when establishing it. One of the rules was, don't date a bro's ex without his permission. I had a sketchy ex that he wanted to date, so I warned him about her, but recognized that his life is his choice. Then he broke up with her, which I kinda saw coming. After a while, he became really self-absorbed because he got a college grant and started shoving it in everyone's face. Basically, he got free college and $1,500 a month while he was in class to spend on whatever. While this was all happening, I was going through my own troubles but kept them to myself. Once those started to boil over, I talked with him about them. I hated my job and was worried I got my then-girlfriend pregnant. I didn't, thankfully. I was having an anxiety attack over this, and he called me a little female dog. Definitely not high on the list of comforting things to say. A couple months later, the ex that I was heartbroken to leave to move posted his story, hacked, "Love you babe, LOL. I was livid. He basically shrugged it off and said, "You didn't want her, why are you so upset?" Well, when we all promised not to do that, I held you to it. That shouldn't be a surprise. Finally, a couple months later, and I'm even more depressed. My girlfriend broke up with me, I was still at that job, on the wrong antidepressants, and had no friends where I lived. One day, he calls me at 11 p.m. and says, "Hey, me and other friend are online. Get on." I calmly say, "Nah, man, I'm tired. I'm going to bed." He said, "Ugh, you always do this, putting yourself before your friends." I stopped. I retaliated. That's some big talk from someone who's come to visit me once in 3 years. I had driven 4 hours one way to spend time with them 4 times in that span, and I was effing broke. This mother effer had no money problems or job. This, of course, started a fight, which escalated the more we talked. This was whole paragraphs of him saying I'm a bad friend for not putting him first, and me providing legitimate evidence as to why I'm sick of his crap. Finally, he called me a little female dog again, and I said, "F it, gloves are off. Here's all the crap you've done to me," where I listed off everything he's done and not apologized for, and everything I've done for him without a thank you, and there was a lot. To this, he said, "You're not going to keep any friends like me if you treat them like this." And I simply said, "Good, that's the point." I haven't spoken to him in 2 years and have no intentions to. I won't apologize because I have nothing to apologize for. Story 23. I'm a journalist, and as in every daily newspaper, the office is one constant noisy brawl. Papers flying about, editors yelling at each other, chief editors yelling at editors, etc., etc. So in comes Steve. Steve is a God-driven dude, really quiet and introvert. He's been working as a page designer for over a decade. He never swears, he never shouts, he never even shows a sign of discomfort. Anywho, on a very stressful day with half an hour to go until print and half our systems non-operational, there are approximately 7 people over Steve telling him what to do simultaneously, including the editor-in-chief and the chief executive of the journal. Around them, there are about 40 more people preparing for next day's edition, with all the yelling and shouting I mentioned before. Steve stops. Steve kindly removes his glasses. Steve pushes slowly his keyboard out of the way and climbs on the desk. Steve releases a primeval cry to get everyone's attention and goes, "Hey, either you all shut the F up right now, or I'm going to be removing the crap out of your asses with my chicken until sunrise." No one talked after that. No one laughed at Steve, and a few people even forgot to breathe for a few seconds from the shock. We've called him Bad Mother Effer Steve ever since. Even got him the same wallet as Sam L. Jackson has in Pulp Fiction. Story 24. To make a long story very short, I went to a middle school that was very conspicuously gerrymandered in the sense that around 60% of the school district were from upper middle class neighborhoods, with the remaining 40% residing in a backdrop from the 90s John Singleton film. That being said, it was an interesting mix of students and always a great laugh. My 8th grade year, I decided to take Spanish as a foreign language, and while I was serious about picking up as much of it as I could, the other half of the class spent most of our class periods roasting each other, beatboxing, and generally creating an atmosphere of chaos and good humor. Enter my Spanish teacher. She was at most 23, beautiful, sweet, and very naive. From the moment she walked into the class, she was expected that she was there to change lives, a task whose impossibility would quickly become apparent. As time went on and the chaos in the classroom became increasingly apparent, one day she literally just snapped. She walked over to the corner where some of my classmates were playing dice, literally gambling in the middle of class, threw their cardboard and dice across the room and just exploded. I've never seen anything like it. She went from sweet and soft-spoken to screaming at the top of her lungs and completely losing it. In a single class period, she suspended 9 students, threatened suspensions for anyone who as much as said a single word for the rest of the year, and even flagged down some security guards to tear some of the more intense problem students away from their desks. Around a week later, she disappeared and was never seen at school again. TLDR, teacher was a kind and gentle soul, went Hulk mode, lost her crap, and was never heard from again. Story 25. I have a friend, W. Super sweet, kinda small, and she's pretty soft-spoken. Never curses beyond the occasional crap and damn. For context, she's Christian and I'm LGBT+. Never been an issue in our 10 years of being friends. Her now ex was being an ass about the Bible and how he interprets it. He claims his way is fact. That, quote, it's right there in black and white. Oh, and he also told her to, quote, not let Wingnut tell her anything about being LGBT. Their lifestyle is wrong. It's in the Bible. I was watching this interaction go down, and I took his punches on the chin. I was rather angry and am usually somewhat confrontational, but willing to keep the peace for W's sake. W hates being told she's wrong, but she was willing to let that go too. But the second he insulted me, I saw her get that look in her eye. She looked him square in the face and said, say what you want about my opinions, everyone has different ones. She stands up, now taller than his still sitting self, but insult my friends, and that's it. We're done, mother effer. So proud of my BB that day. Story 26. Nice guy put up with bully making fun of him, but snapped when jerk said something about his girlfriend. My friend was nicknamed Rat because he was skinny with a big nose. Super nice guy who had a lot of friends but never a girlfriend. Senior year of high school, he has a girlfriend who also rode the same bus as us. The guy who thought he was so cool starts asking her how she could date Rat because he was so ugly. He'd bullied Rat for years, who always seemed to ignore it. Then the bully asked the girlfriend if she felt fat standing next to Rat. He could have said anything about Rat with no issue, but once he started making fun of his girlfriend, it was over the line. They start pushing and shoving on the bus. The bully challenges him to a fight. They all get off at the next stop. I still remember everyone plastered against the back windows of the bus to watch what was going on. Bully had his fists up and dancing around like he was a boxer. Rat threw one punch and down went the jerk. Broke his nose and cheekbone. Pushed part of his nose into his brain. He needed surgery and had to wear a cage around his face when he returned to school. The whole time, the jerk kept calling Rat's girlfriend names, knowing as long as he had the cage on his face, nothing would be done. After months of rehab and training, he decided to challenge Rat to another fight. They got off the bus together again, and again he puts up his fists and dances around. Again, Rat hit him right in the nose, and down goes Frazier. Everyone yelled, and the bus driver pulled over to radio for help. We thought he killed him. Just broke his nose again. I'm sure the jerk thought the first time was a lucky punch, and no way a skinny kid will get him twice. Jerky Kid now has a flattened boxer's nose. I lost track of Rat a few years after college. He was still skinny and going by Rat. Still a nice guy. Life seemed good for him. This was in the 70s. Today, the police would have been called and lawsuits filed. So I appreciate the clarification at the end there that this happened in the 70s. I'm like, how could this happen today and not be like all over TikTok? Because nowadays, people don't help people in crises. Instead, they whip their phones out and they start live streaming that stuff. So, man. And also, how do you get part of your nose pushed into your brain? That sounds kind of painful. Story 27. 20-odd years ago, now back in high school, senior math and class bully was just being a jerk in general to a couple of the shy kids. I'm dropping a first name because if this guy ever reads this post, he might get a smile out of it. Ian was a 6'3", 90 kg-ish quiet kid, was academically incredible, and was, in my opinion, a fantastic pianist. Due to his size, I guess he was never really harassed in a physical way until this day. Class bully was talking crap as usual, then for some reason focused his attention on Ian. Hats off to the chap because he didn't respond and just carried on. The bully slapped the things off his desk and the typical "what you gonna do about it" ensued. Ian picked up his crap and put it back on the table, then tries to go back to his prep. I should mention this is all happening right before the teacher arrived to start the class. Bully slaps it all away again and then calls Ian a coward or something similar. This was years ago, I can't remember exactly. Now, I mentioned earlier that Ian was quiet. Well, I had known him since we were in preschool, so with me, he would talk occasionally. To everyone outside of the people he knew, you could be forgiven for thinking he was mute. Well, at this point, without anything getting violent, Ian kicks out his chair and gets up face to face with the bully. Half a foot taller and 20 kgs heavier, so I should say he's kind of looming. Ian lets loose this ungodly, loud, bellowing roar straight down into the bully's face. "What the F is your problem?" That was it. I crap you not, you could have heard a sparrow fart at 100 meters. Ian is trembling with rage like effing Wolverine in those X-Men movies. Shout out to Hugh Jackman. And Bully gets hit with that "oh" from the rest of the class as the silence starts to break. But Bully doesn't move or say anything. Memory fades out at this point, but I can tell you the bully dude left our school sometime later for who knows what reason. Ian never cropped crap from anyone again that I know of, and I'm pretty sure a couple of the girls in class saw him in a different light that day. He also graduated with fantastic marks. I hope he's doing well. Go Ian. Story 28. Alright, this was back in junior high/middle school. I'm in the math class for kids who don't do well with math. Extra time, less kids for more one-on-one help, etc. Well, there's this huge 212-pound Mexican dude we called Big Jorge. He was like a teddy bear, but he was nothing but muscle. Friendly but reserved. He spoke fluent English, but his accent was so thick that I couldn't understand him anyway. Big Jorge actually cared about learning, but between his language barrier and the too fast pace that the regular classes went, he was struggling. Then there was T.C. Cooklin, 100 pounds wet. Class clown extraordinaire. Cooklin's the name, disruption's the game, paired alongside his sidekick Maurice, who looked like Rollo from the Cleveland Show, about 2 years before the Cleveland Show was even a thing. Anyway, the two would do anything they could to stop class and have fun doing it. Things like humping the air, fart noises during tests and lessons, all physically harmless, but still. Well, one day, the teacher stepped out to take two girls who had been slap fighting to the office, and T.C. Cooklin made his move. He began to poke Big Jorge. Apparently, nobody told him that poking the bear was a bad idea, or he just liked the danger. IDK. Now, Big Jorge, he's a forgiving dude, but he has his limits, and today was the day those limits broke. Big Jorge grabbed Cooklin by his collar and threw him like a football across the room, where he impacted with the teacher's desk, and stunned look on Cooklin's face I'll never forget. Big Jorge will be a father later this year. Story 29. There's this one friend that I've known pretty much all my life. She tries to be kind to everyone, even when the other person is being a prick. During high school, in English class, this one guy named Matt that would bully her for being Asian. She'd make strange gibberish sounds at her, mimicking Chinese, but very badly, might I add. Though this may seem not that bad to others, I could tell it definitely bothered her. I actually think it's pretty strange, too. She's never even spoken a lick of Chinese any time in the class, yet Matt kept teasing her. Anyways, I digress. One day, while we were in class, she came in before the bell like always. I noticed she looked a bit annoyed already. The teacher hasn't started her lesson yet, so my friend starts to talk to me, and that's when Matt decides to bother her again. Once she started to talk, Matt goes, "Ah, fue? Belizue wa?" She stops talking, pauses for a second, then turns to him. At that moment, I knew something was going to happen. She got up from her chair and walked over to him. I don't remember exactly what she said, but this is the closest to what she said. "Hey, Matt, did you have a stroke or something?" "No, 'cause it seems like you have a stroke every time you talk to me. Maybe it's because you're so effing dumb that your brain just shuts down. Either ways, I'm so effing done with your bullcrap, Matt. Unless you're actually having a mother effing stroke, I don't want to hear another one of those sounds. You're not funny. No one thinks you're funny. If you think that being effing racist is effing funny, then maybe you did actually have a stroke. Effing stop it. I'm so done with you and your effing noises. Just stop being such a female dog and shut the F up. Got it?" By the end of that sentence, Matt has recoiled in his chair while my friend was standing there, panting from her outrage. In the background, I can hear one of our other friends laughing, but not at her. "Holy crap, that's the first time I've heard you curse. God damn, she told you off, Matt." After that, she huffed and sat back down. Surprisingly, the teacher didn't notice because she didn't say anything. Or she did notice, but watched it unfurl. I'm pretty sure the teacher did notice, and once she saw justice being served, just kind of let it go, like a good teacher. Story 30. A really calm friend of mine got annoyed every single day by this other dude in our class. I don't know if I would call it bullying, but it was just every single day, stupid little things, and he didn't leave him alone with this for like months. He kept doing this and making fun of it more and more, up to a point where he would just literally for hours in class toss paper balls at him, literally page-wise, and then switch to the spit paper ball things that he used to shoot out of a blowgun made out of a pen. At some day, he kept doing it over and over again, as usual. It was quite a hot day in school, and we had no ventilation. Everyone is sweating and feeling kind of itchy, and we had a long school day that day. Then it happened after that dude crumbled up note pages into hand-sized balls and threw them at his head whenever the teacher didn't pay attention or turned around. Then, after a few of those, he told him one time without looking, "I dare you to throw another one." This was odd for especially the cold tone he spoke in. The dude waited about 5 seconds, then ripped off another note page and formed it into a ball again. The second he was in throwing motion, my friend stood up, grabbed his chair from beneath him, and swung it over his head and effing hammered that chair down on that bully. The bully had almost no time to react and used the throwing arm as some kind of protection against the impending doom that was about to hit him. I never heard a bone break, but this bully's hand literally shattered and made the weirdest sound I've ever heard a body make. The bully fell back with his now deformed hand protecting him and just staring at him in shock. My friend just calmly stood up and left the classroom because he knew that he would have had to go to the principal's office instantly. My friend wasn't allowed to visit the school for a week, I think. The only thing I can say after that is that the bully never effed with him again. No one did. That was maybe one of the most badass things I've ever seen, but I have to say, that bully had it coming and I am surprised he only hit him once. Story 31. Bit of a different story, but it made me think of it. This was a guy who I was friends with, / maybe dating, who was oddly detached, but extremely kind to me. I was the only person he seemed to like. Other than his mom, he never did anything but sweet, incredibly lovely things for me. Found out my favorite album on vinyl and had it ready to go every time I came over. Let me nap and tucked me into his bed when I came over one day exhausted after work. Taught himself how to make special hot chocolate from scratch to drink it with me and pretend to like coffee because I love it. One time we were sitting in his living room at his cabinet grand piano. I'm a singer, and he would always ask me to sing for him whenever he could, whether it was singing along to vinyls in his room or screwing around while we ate lunch or playing karaoke tracks on YouTube so I could sing to him. He said my voice brought him peace. He knew a little bit of piano, enough from childhood lessons to get by, and the two of us were sharing the piano bench while he noodled around on the keys and tried to make a melody over it. His little brother came up the stairs, completely harmlessly, and walked into an open-concept kitchen talking to their mom. The guy I was with immediately turned around and yelled at him, as brothers do, "Can you be quiet? I can't hear her." His brother kicked back and told him to shut up. "I'm just talking to Mom," clearly stoking the flame. So the guy I was with got up off the bench, jumped clear over the coffee table, and threw a full force right hook at his brother straight in the effing jaw. just because he was speaking over my song. There was a little blood. I was so horrified, but mainly just shocked. It happened so fast I couldn't even blink. I later realized he had an extremely violent temper and was probably genuinely a sociopath. He seemed to feel no real empathy towards anything. I made myself disappear and I haven't seen him since, but he still did nothing but kind things for me. Always. It was weird. Anyways, that's that story. Story 32. Somebody messed with my brother. Don't do that. Middle school, I'm in 8th grade, my brother's in 7th. I've never fought anyone in my life, never made a point of being mean, and hated confrontation up until this point. Walked out of school one day to where we got picked up, and some kids are shoving my brother around, throwing snow at him and swinging their binders at him, calling him a bunch of vile, nasty names I don't even want to think about. I lost it. Absolutely lost it. Pulled my brother out of there and just started screaming and swinging. He was crying. I was yelling so loud, my voice hurt for the next week. I told them to leave, get the F out. Meanwhile, we're surrounded by people who have never heard me curse or raise my voice against anyone. I don't really remember too much of what happened after that, but I know they got suspended for a week and got stuck with some random school chores or something. Nobody ever messed with him again after that, at least at that school. You can mess with me or bully me all you want, but don't touch my family. I haven't fought or lost it at anyone since. My brother and I still fight with each other because we're siblings and that's what siblings do, but he knows I have his back no matter what. TLDR, I hated confrontation, up until somebody messed with my brother, then I completely lost it. They got suspended and nobody messed with him again. Story 33. My story is about me and a substitute teacher I had for Spanish in 8th grade. I'm a nice guy and at the time decently shy. Not popular, but athletic and known by enough people. Anytime someone messed with me, I just brushed it off and never really said anything. The first exception to this was when my normal Spanish teacher was out on maternity leave for about 7 weeks. The substitute had to ask me to stop talking at the beginning of class one day and labeled me as the problem child. This was a new one for me since all my previous teachers liked me and I did really well in class. Over the next few weeks, she would call me on the small list of infractions, or ones I had not done. Looking back, I guess she was using me as an example of power. The straw that broke the camel's back happened in week 4. My friends and I were a few minutes early to class, as usual, and we were talking. I saw the teacher get up from her desk, and I knew class was starting, so I stopped talking. I had been quiet for close to 20 seconds, and she yells at me to stop talking. I was done with this crap. I stood up and said something like, "When was I talking? I stopped talking when you got up to the desk and had been silent for at least 20 seconds. Can you explain to me what I did wrong just now? I will not be yelled at for things I've not done." After that, I sat down and she just started class. From then on, I was her favorite student. That was the only time I yelled at a teacher. It was worth it. Story 34. I was the quiet, teacher's pet, smart kid at school, mostly because I was too anxious to ever talk or get less than perfect grades. I was also a huge people pleaser, so I never really got on anyone's bad side, because I agonized over staying neutral and trying to be pleasant around everyone, including the bullies and kids who liked picking on the quiet kids to try and get a rise out of us. Anyway, there was this huge football player, a grade or 2 lower than me, named Tyree, and he was kind of an a-hole to everyone, but me and my friends, aka 2 other girls who were twins, were particular favorites. One day, my friends were gone. I was just sitting off by myself in gym class reading a book, my usual MO because gym class consisted of us sitting in the bleachers because the teacher told us we'd all get A's if we didn't act up. Of course, Tyree started up. I don't even remember what he was saying, but when it was clear I was trying to ignore him as usual, and he realized my friends weren't there, he started in making fun of them. I was used to getting picked on, so I'd quit responding to it. But something about hearing them trash talk my friends while they weren't there to roll their eyes and tell them to grow up, I started getting really mad. Like, madder than I've ever been. But I kept hearing my mom's, "They only want to get a rise out of you" lecture, so I kept silent and tried to read. But then he said something about ugly, fat, stanky-ass little sister, and it's like I had an out-of-body experience from rage. I have no idea what I was actually planning to do if he decided to escalate, given that he was twice my size and I can't even open a jar on my own, but I would have gladly thrown hands with a rabid tiger for my sister, and I just kind of went on autopilot. I stood up, slammed my book down so loud everyone jumped and went dead silent, and I screamed, "Shut up!" at him. He froze and looked almost terrified for a split second, and then tried to play it off by saying, "Oh, you want to go?" And I was so mad and shaking that I went, "Bring it!" And a bunch of the other kids jumped up in front of him and went, "Nah, man, you don't want to fight her. she know that karate, man. I was taking Tang Soo Do self-defense lessons. I guess it got blown out of proportion through the gossip chain. And then the gym teacher goes, Tyree, if she beats your ass, I'm gonna let her. You gotta learn to shut up, man. Which of course got Tyree started in on him, and the other kids laughing their heads off. So I got to cool down and go back to reading. I did apologize to the gym teacher on my way out, and he just shrugged and said, don't do it again. But honestly, if you wanted to hit him, nobody was going to suspend you. Pays to be a teacher's pet sometimes. Story 35. Giving pulp out of his younger sister's BF. She's freshman, BF was a senior. The older brother was a big nerd. He was also one of the most intelligent, genuine, and nice guys in the school. One day during lunch, the younger sister's BF, who was an ass clown, to put it shortly, decided to throw a bunch of fries across the lunchroom. It hit the older brother, and the sister's BF called him a FG instead of apologizing. The brother gets up and walks over to him and asks why he called him that instead of just saying sorry. The BF said, because I get to SA your sister during sex every night. Everyone could not believe what they heard. The brother dragged him to the bathroom by his hair, and I assume just beat the living crap out of him. There was a big crowd, so staff couldn't immediately get to them. There was blood literally all over the bathroom. To put their sizes into perspective, the older brother was 6'2" and 240 pounds, dad bod with big arms, and the BF was a self-described hacker and was 5'5", maybe 140 pounds. He never came back to school after that beating. Story 36. I do research at a university in Virginia under the PI, otherwise known as the Boss Lady. This lab is a cardiac MRI lab, and we're encouraged to ask lots of questions and make sure we actually understand what we're doing, so we do it correctly. We work on over 30 patients, so you mess up one, you'll most likely mess up all, and that could mean a month's worth of work. Now, talking about the Boss Lady, wonderful, knowledgeable, patient, and kind woman. Never once had a bad experience with her. I do what she wants, she treats me well. Well, she hired a new person in our lab, and let's say she doesn't understand how important it is to do it correctly the first time, but keeps nodding her head when asked if she knows what to do. Not even a question asked. Fast forward 2 months. The research is about to be submitted to NIH and etc. So this is a very important time. New hire gives the spreadsheet data to the boss lady, and all stats are wrong. Messed up for sure. A mistake definitely happened somewhere. This stats took 2 months to retrieve. The look on the PI's face was priceless. She looked at the new hire and back at the stats. You could tell she was trying her hardest not to be angry, but she was picking out everything that was wrong. I've never seen her behave this way, and it absolutely scared the crap out of me. She was trying so hard to control her tone, but her anger was showing through. Well, now, I haven't seen the new hire in a few weeks, and I think I know what happened. Story 37. My mom and dad divorced before I was born. I lived with my dad in America and visited my mom over in the UK every few years. In 2017, I stayed at my mom's for the year since I was going to college. During that time, it was hard taking on college, working at British Heart Foundation, and cancer research. My mom would hurt me to the point I'd feel so worthless of myself. I'll give you a few for example. One night, my oldest brother stumbled in my room drunk and got into bed with me. I panicked and yelled at him to get out since I have PTSD, and the experience of that triggered me badly. Called my dad begging to come home. Mom overheard, busted into my room, and called me disgusting for assuming he'd put his hands on me and SA me. She called me a disappointment and told me I wasn't here to be loved by her. She wasn't going to comfort me if I needed it, and she wasn't going to show me love because I needed to toughen up. She told me to my face, one day my boyfriend is going to walk in on you having sex with other men, and he's going to catch you cheating. Almost 6 years with my BF, and I've never done that to him. Getting to the point where I finally lost it. My mom is a chain smoker and has been smoking for over 20 years. I grabbed every cigarette, every lighter, and tossed it in the trash. All hell broke loose. Mom and I are in the front yard and she gets in my face yelling at me to not touch her crap. This was the moment. Never in my whole life have I ever reached this point. The feeling I had in that moment was horrifying. I yelled what felt like was past the top of my lungs. My lungs felt like they were on fire, burning inside. I told her she was a horrible mother to me. that cigarette were more important than me, that she never loved me, she used me, broke me, messed me up in so many ways I can't recover from. I love and hate my mother, but she isn't someone worth keeping in your life. For anyone who ever tells me she's a sweet woman in person, it's an act. It's what she's good at. She's not a mother. Story 38. Several of us successfully convinced a colleague, Tom, that if he successfully clipped this light-up toy to the nicest guy in the office, Mark, we'd give him 10 euros. Tom was young and cocky, but whiny and wholly useless lad, full of his own self-importance and devoid of courtesy and knowledge, the sort whose arrogance caused others more work. I messaged Mark explaining the challenge given to Tom and said I'd have someone near us call Mark over so Tom could make an attempt. The twist was that Mark should catch Tom in the act. Tom didn't get paid. We all have a laugh. Happy days. Well, crap. Mark's performance was so far and above anything we'd expected, being the nice and seemingly timid guy he was. Tom made his attempt, and without so much as a second's hesitation, Mark turns to Tom and screams, "What the F do you think you're doing?" The entire office stops. Those of us who are in on it are already trying to stifle laughs fairly unsuccessfully. Tom flushes white and starts to stammer a bit of an excuse. They said they'd give me a tenner if... Mark cuts in angrily with, "Are you a child? If they told you to run into traffic, you wouldn't do it, would you? You effing idiot." Cue Tom turning bright red and sitting down quietly. The rest of us roar with laughter. It takes a full 10 to 15 minutes for us to all calm down. Tom is still flushed and quiet. After a few more minutes, I call him over, explain what had happened, and gave him the tenner. He stood dumbfounded for a minute or two, eventually relaxing and calling us various mages, but laughing about it. 2 things came off it in the end. Although his competence didn't really improve, Tom was far less arrogant. The other being that most people in the office held a newfound weary respect of Mark. Story 39. Hopefully it's not too presumptuous to talk about myself. I dated this girl in high school for 3 years. Me and her were practically inseparable, and we went through a whole lot together. We were friends first, but eventually it became something romantic, even though we didn't really acknowledge it at first. We visited each other's houses all the time, and we knew each other's families almost better than we knew some of our closest friends. Both of us struggled with a few mental health issues. For her, it was mainly depression, and for me, it was mostly severe anxiety. We weren't perfect, but for the most part, I always did my best to treat her right. We were there for each other for a lot of critical moments in our lives. We both struggled largely with our religion until we became atheists, for example. I really don't know how everything fell apart, but it did. The week before things got bad for us, I was on vacation with her and her family. She had gotten into this huge, trivial fight with her parents, in front of me, which was really awkward, and then stormed out of where we were staying. I went after her, and she talked about how she wanted to unalive herself, and how she thought I should be doing more to make her feel better. She told me I should be putting my own problems, anxiety, depression, and living with an abusive parent, aside to help her more than I already was. I was entirely ready to do that too, which I now recognize would have been extremely unhealthy. Anyway, the week we get back from vacation, she starts seeing one of my 2 best friends, who I'd known for over 8 years at the time. She didn't tell me about it, which was weird because we told each other everything. Like everything. Anyway, a few rough months pass where I'm trying my best to help her with her problems. She refused to see a professional, while I let my own unattended. At some point, I realized that something had changed, not just with her, but also with my friends. Suddenly, they all seemed like they were uncomfortable around me, almost hostile towards me. They started hanging out together without me at my friend's house, which was only 5 minutes from mine. My ex, who at this point I still thought I was dating and still talked to regularly, even though she was upset with me for a nebulous reason she chose never to explain to me, told my friends that she'd broken up with me and openly started dating one of my best friends without telling me. I remember at lunch one day, I was sitting with them. Things had long since become awkward, but no one would talk to me about it. I had tried to ask people privately if I had done something to upset them, but they never answered me. We were talking about something, I don't remember what exactly, when my ex just plainly stated that, quote, I sounded like my father. For reference, I've never told my friends about my domestic situation, but it seemed like she had. I just kind of shut down until the end of lunch. After school, I waited by her car to talk to her, to ask her why she had said that and what all she had told my friends. She walked up with my bro she was now dating, and after a short conversation told me I was, quote, manipulative, scary, and dangerous, and that she was dating my friend now. She made it clear she didn't want me around. She had also told me that she had told my friends that I had SA'd her and physically harmed her a few times. Needless to say, that was not true. When I got home, I got drunk, which was the first time I'd ever done that, by the way. Went to our group chat and vented absolutely everything I had been feeling for the past few months to them. I told them that I thought they were terrible, hypocritical people, and that if they really thought a hell existed, they should call ahead and make a reservation, essentially. I also told them that I had started to hurt myself, and that if I decided to unalive myself, they should know it was because of them. Obviously, that was a terrible thing to say to people, especially in a group chat of all places. After that, I generally avoided them, but I did spend the rest of the year gossiping in my very small school about all the crap they had done and about how weird they were, which I also probably shouldn't have done. Anyway, yeah, that's it, I guess. None of this is a problem for me anymore, and the things I mentioned in here have all been resolved. Hopefully, I didn't just ruin anyone's mood. Story 40. This'll probably get buried, but whatever. I've always been very quiet and a bit shy. My parents and friends have always said my strongest trait is my empathy, to the point me just being kind in a dumb way. My ex is a grand example of someone taking advantage of that. I don't know if she did so on purpose or not. Well, she emotionally cheated on me for a couple of months, went behind my back and built a relationship with this other guy, and when she eventually broke up with me, she was with him the same day. She lied to my face on so many occasions, I'm not sure what happened, but a few good friends of mine approached me and told me what had been going on behind my back, but they never thought she had the ability to do anything like this. He had been touching her, telling her to break up with me multiple times. She let it happen, and eventually had told him he liked him. I refused to believe it at first. Like, I understand I'm not entitled to anything because of the way I treated her, but I gave her absolutely everything. I've never been angry in my life. I changed my whole way of life to take care of her when she needed it, and at the first opportunity, she threw me away. I carried her for 2.5 years, quite literally 2. When her feet hurt outside, I would carry her for miles if I had to. I expected at least to be treated with some amount of respect. But after letting my brain stir everything for weeks' time, and her continuing to treat me like absolute garbage the few times we talked, I absolutely tilted when she gave me what I interpreted as a smug look outside an auditorium at my uni. I marched up to her, in public mind you, and told her, do us both a favor, don't even effing look at me. I have no idea who you even are anymore. You have no effing shame. People are disgusted by you both. Respectless whore you are. Burn in hell. She was being sarcastic back, but I know she was scared to all hell. Her best friend, who is a friend of mine too, and has told her multiple times what she's done is not okay, said to me later that she was afraid I'd hit her or go destroy her car, and considered calling the police. Overreaction, of course. Turns out, my ex has no idea what kind of person I am after all the time we've lived together. My best friends were with me when this happened, and I told them to stop me if I tried to approach them. One of them did by touching my shoulder, and he told me when I turned and looked at him he didn't recognize me at all, and just let me go. He gave me this speech about anger is like holding a fire. You're just gonna hurt yourself until you throw it in the face of those who lit it. Afterward, but I don't know if I agree with that. I appreciate him though. I of course regretted this right afterwards and sent a text message to her and apologized for reacting like that in public. I did, however, not apologize for what I said. Didn't type that out though. Never got a reply. Haven't talked to her since. I'm sad about the entire situation because I know neither her parents or her best friend has any respect for the relationship at all. And all the friends she's lost through this makes me just wonder how on earth she doesn't realize what she's done is wrong. She's adamant that this has all been okay. Fantasies, of course. Edit. Honestly, I just hope my ex outlives the label she's received and gets a good life. Happiness is all I ever wanted for her. I don't care if she realizes what she's done or if she ever apologizes. It just sucks to still care about her. Story 41. One of my best friends, who would never go out of her way to hurt someone and would sooner hurt herself than someone else, and I noticed that the rest of our friends seemingly ignored her, just had her around because I was her friend. We were teenagers at the time and I didn't want to lose all my friends, so I kept quiet. I occasionally mentioned it to some of them like, feels crap sometimes when best friend talks and no one seems to respond or listen, and some of them would agree and say they feel bad about but just never know what to say. Few months of this, and one time one friend said in response to her, "Oh, sorry, I wasn't really listening," and my friend turned and yelled, "Well, that's the effing problem. You never effing listen to me, do ya?" Best part was trying to see the other friends try to defend themselves. I had to mention the conversations we had where they agreed they ignored her, so why the lie now? Anyways, those friends ended up hating us for, and I quote, showing our true colors. LMAO, we're good now and have found friends who listen to her and care for her like she does for them. Story 42. Playing basketball at the local park with a friend of mine all the time. I got to know a lot of the regulars, and they would play with me occasionally when they wanted a chill game, and I was working my ass off to give them a little competition. They were just a lot better than me, but we were good enough to get props. This was the 90s, and there was a racial component to it. Me and my friend were white and Indian, and all the regular kids were black, and we all got along just fine even though we weren't really friends or hung out or anything. They liked us well enough. Well, once these two Mexican kids showed up and decided they were going to get in with the black kids, they figured they would screw with me and my friend and come off cool. The black kids weren't going to defend us or anything. They just let us handle our business and not get involved. If we get punked, it's not their problem. It was that kind of thing. So anyway, the Mexican pair challenge us to 2-on-2, and we accept, just figuring they want a game. As we're playing, they start fouling us. After a couple, we tell them to take it easy. It's just a friendly game. They take this as their cue to start really fouling hard. And finally, one of them decides we're not doing anything, so he goes to just full-on trip me, trying to make a show of it, so there's no doubt to anyone watching that this is a display of dominance. Little did they know that I was about 5 minutes past pissed off by now with the fouls. I was considering walking away from the game at that point, and I was just effing seething. My Indian friend was a bit more of a gentle soul and wanted to walk away, but he was a little more scared than angry. The other thing to know about me, I'm not a fighter. Literally everyone was surprised by what happened next. Most of all me. But once this little F tried to sweep my foot and I suddenly realized they weren't playing the game at all, they were just being crap heels, I suddenly went on autopilot. My reaction was instantaneous, explosive, and extremely violent. I happened to be taking the basketball up to the top of the key, and when he stuck his foot out, I kicked his ankle hard. In the split second he looked at me, mouth wide open in shock, I had pulled the basketball back and hurled that thing into his face full force. It hit solid, and his nose just exploded. There was instantly blood everywhere. This whole thing went down in like less than a second, and he was flat on his back. By the time his friend even realized it was on, it was too late. I had charged him and caught him square in the chest with a stiff arm. At first, it was just enough to get him off balance, but I kept accelerating, pushing him back toward the hoop. I kinda lined him up with the giant steel post holding up the backboard and just ran him into it full on, both arms in his chest. I knocked the wind out of him and he crumpled, wheezing. At that point, I thought I'd just stand over him and start yelling, "You wanna fight? I thought you wanted to fight. Come on, let's fight." Blah, blah, blah. But I could see this second kid was just waiting to catch his breath, and he didn't quite seem properly scared. It was more like he was just waiting this out, and he was going to come back at me. Again, this just really effing pissed me off for some reason, and I saw red again. By the way, I know this is making me sound like a badass, but you have to understand, this is like the one time I did something like this, and all the best parts were autopilot. I literally had no control over what I was doing. Anyway, instead of screaming at him, I just reached down and grabbed a full-on handful of his greasy hair and went for a little stroll, dragging him back toward the center of the court a bit. Once he was laid out, still wheezing, it's only been like a second or two, I dropped his head, went back around and just sat down right on his chest, side saddle. When you have the wind knocked out of you, it totally sucks. You're hyperventilating and for a moment paralyzed, but if you're calm, it will quickly pass and you can go on with life. Being put on your back is even better when you're hyperventilating, if you didn't know, unless that is someone roughly your size is sitting on your chest. In that case, it's a lot more difficult to be calm. You're suffocating. The fear in this kid's face when he realized this was it. There wasn't going to be trash talk or punches raining down on him, just some slightly overweight kid sitting on him, watching him fade out. Now that was a look of panic. This is roughly the same feeling I'd guess as being waterboarded. I hung out for a few good seconds just to make sure my message stuck. And at this point, some of the black kids came over with those kids' bikes, pulled me off the one, helped the other one sit up. He was functionally blind for the moment, and advised them that they, quote, better get the F out of here or this white kid finna kill you Mexican mother effers. So the black kids hustled them out, one of them just a leaking mess, and the other one blubbering and hysterical as they walked their bikes off into the distance. Then the biggest black kid looked at me and said, "Yo, you need to chill the F out, Holmes." So I apologized to them, to this day, not sure why I did that, but they seemed to take it as a sign of respect. And my friend and I walked to his house and spent the next 2 hours destroying Mario Bros. On NES. TLDR, Black, yo, we cool. Mex, F Whitey. Me, I'll burn down this whole place. Black, damn, chill. Mex, skitters off. Story 43. In my last year of high school, I was going through issues with depression, which wasn't helped by some arsehole who went out of his way to pick on me. At my school's Year 12 formal, he decided to rag on me after I found out that the girl who stood me up was there with another guy, and I had to be held back by my friends from swinging on him. But the final straw was when I was in the school library at lunchtime, doing some reading. Arsehole walked up to me and started swatting me with a rolled-up newspaper, despite telling him to leave me alone. I finally picked up my chair, yelled, "That's it!" and proceeded to chase him through a crowded and fully staffed library with a chair raised over my head and almost foaming at the mouth while he ran off like a scalded dog. The next day, while hanging out with my friends, he walked up to me and actually apologized to me for what he did. My response? Good. Better not effing happen again. I think he was scared both of the fact that I was willing to retaliate in such a public manner and that I never suffered any punishment from it, despite clearly running past the school librarian while trying to hit someone with a chair in a blind rage. In a kind of funny postscript to that, a couple of years later, I bumped into someone that I went to school with and had this conversation. T, hey man, remember when you chased arsehole through the library with a chair? Me, can't believe you remember that. T, you know someone recorded that on their phone. Me, what? I never did get to see that video. Story 44. There is a kid in junior high I'll call Bob. Bob was slow and, to be honest, could be extremely annoying to be around. He wasn't a bad kid or anything, just taxing. I imagine he was somewhere on the spectrum, but this was the early 1990s, so who knows if it was a diagnosed issue or not. There was a group of a-holes in the school, just your general run-of-the-mill douche canoes. They liked to pick on Bob. They liked to pick on fat kids. They liked to pick on just about anyone who wasn't in their group. One day, there was a huge commotion in the hallway. I didn't see how it started, but one of the group of miscreants, whom I'll call John, is punching Bob in the back of the head as he's walking down the hallway trying to get away. This gang of knuckle-draggers is behind him, cheering him on. John is laying into Bob, just winding up and punching him in the head every other step. This story isn't about Bob rising up and snapping. Our hero is a guy I'll call AJ. AJ is friendly and quiet. AJ is also a very large 13-year-old. He's easily 6'3" or 6'4" already, and would be close to 6'10" as an adult. AJ was the kind of kid who wouldn't say crap if he had a mouth full of it. I'm still not sure where AJ came from, but all of a sudden he had John by the throat and effing launched him into the lockers. John hit like a hefty bag of vegetable soup being tossed off a parking garage. Everyone was stunned, quiet, and there were a lot of bystanders at this point. John picks himself up off the floor and managed to get out, "What the before AJ just started wailing on him. One of John's friends decided to involve himself and got dropped for his efforts. I want to say it was only 15 to 20 seconds before teachers finally poured in to stop it. But the damage John took in that short amount of time was just vicious. AJ just pounded his face raw. He ended up having to go to the hospital because, unbeknownst to any of us, John was a hemophiliac and was bleeding like you effing read about. In the end, both were given suspensions but remained in school. You have to imagine that if that happened today, there would be some sort of expulsion and/or criminal charges. But again, this was 30 years ago. Story 45. God, I love telling this story. It was actually me. Yeah, me. So there had been this girl. She was kind of a bully to everyone, making empty threats such as, "If you don't do this, I'll hurt you," or "If you don't do this, I'll hurt myself." Everyone was kind of forced to like her, fall to their knees and praise her, and kiss her shoes while they were at it. It was very manipulative. I was one of the few who saw through her bullcrap. She didn't really threaten me at first, though. I don't think she even knew I existed until I became friends with the girl she had shared a locker with. For a few days, my eyeliner had ended up getting smudged by the end of the day. So here's where it's stashed. I smudged my eyeliner unknowingly one day and ended up sitting near her on the bus. She looked at me and said, "Hey, your eyeliner is smudged." I kinda was just like, "Oh, whoops, I'll fix that when I get home." She then went on to basically call me an ugly-ass female dog, and the such. She kept calling me things like that, then talked to her friends a bit, and then turned back to me. She was like, "You okay? You look depressed as F." I was like, "No, I'm fine." Then we stopped at my stop, and I got off the bus. This went on for a while. One day, after about a month of dating her locker partner, we'll call her Allie, Allie broke up with me. She said that she wanted to break up. I guess the bully, we'll call her Ursula, took Allie's phone and texted me from it. She called me an ugly, fishy-ass female dog. She made it look like Allie had said it, and it broke my 7th grade heart. I was so depressed and confused about it. A few days later, she was doing her usual call Emily, that's me, ugly routine. This girl had a pregnancy scare when she was 13, so I kind of whispered that being ugly was better than having a pregnancy scare at 13. She was like, "Female dog, what did you say?" And I said, straight to her face, I said that being ugly was better than having a pregnancy scare at 13. She was stunned. The kid behind me was like, "Oh, if you guys got in a fight, Emily would win." And I kind of shook my head and denied it. I've always been on the weaker side. She looked at me and said, "Do you want to fight?" I said no, because it's frankly immature. The next morning, I was with my friends. We'll call them Isabel and Rose. Me and Isabel are talking, and Rose had her headphones on because she was doing homework when Ursula came over to the table. She sat right across from me and said, "Do you want to fight?" I gave the same response as last time. She said, "If you don't get off at my stop today, I'll get off at yours." And then she left. We were telling Rose what had happened right next to her when Ursula came back. She added, "By the way, if you tell anyone, it'll make it 10 times worse. I could kill a female dog and my mom wouldn't care." Then she straight up death glared Isabel and Rose. The bell rang to go to class so it wouldn't look sus when we went to tell the principal, who stood at the end of the hallway I need to go down every day. My friends also passed that hall. I, on the verge of tears, told them that Ursula had threatened to fight me. I then went to the bathroom and cried for a few minutes. I was terrified. I had snitched after all. I got to first period and got to work. The principal eventually tapped me on the shoulder. I then sat in the office. I pet the library dog because he was in there. Eventually, I got called to the vice principal's office. I told him everything. The scary part was that my phone wouldn't send texts until I got back onto a Wi-Fi connection, so my parents wouldn't get my paragraphs for a while. He called my parents and told them what happened. Ursula was in a different room. It was terrifying, guys. If you're getting bullied, tell an adult. Story 46. I generally try to be nice to everyone because, I'm so crippled by anxiety and fear that everyone is constantly judging me and my actions. But anyways, I'm also very quiet at school. One day I'm in geometry and we're doing an activity where we solve a problem with our group on the whiteboard for points. I'm at a group with my friend and a boy. We share answers and the guy gets a couple in a row right while me and my friend get them wrong. We spend too much time discussing answers and don't get the points. This guy keeps calling us retarded instead of explaining how he got the answer and saying we aren't cooperating. Claims we don't talk to him and I'm copying off a friend. First of all, we got the same answer. It happens. Second, we weren't talking to him because he keeps saying how we're retarded because we got an answer wrong. So things escalated and we get into a yelling match in class. Something I would never do to anyone. This guy is just always like this, so he's a special exception. Honestly, I would have fought him if the teacher hadn't moved his seat before it got that far. Probably sounds like I'm exaggerating, but this really happened. I also probably sound like an a-hole with no cool, but it wasn't even 8 a.m. and I was doing math all morning, lol. Also, not as climactic as, I'm sorry, breaking a dude's arm, but it's what I got. Have a nice day. Story 47. There is this guy, let's call him Kevin, in my old school. We were 14, I think. That jumped in on the second half of the year and was not that talkative, but was a very humble and down-to-earth guy, and also incredibly nice to everyone, even if he knew them or not. He was around 6'3" and kinda skinny, but still no one I would pick a fight with. But for some reason, the school's bullies, a trio of guys that you rarely saw in school, made it their mission to screw with this guy as much as possible. Everyone noticed this, but didn't really do anything for some reason, mostly because this guy didn't seem that bothered, to be honest. Well, a couple months in, and there's this long corridor where me and some friends are just hanging out after class when Kevin rushes past us with the trio closely behind when one of the guys, for some reason, kicks Kevin really hard and makes him fall down. This is the moment when I guess Kevin finally snaps. In the blink of an eye, he's up on his feet and manages to grab the kicker by his hair and bashes his face right against the locker, effectively breaking his nose and knocking him out in the process. Before any of us could even react to what was happening, he had the other guy by his arm and just broke it right there and then. Everything happened so effing fast that the third guy in the trio just stood there for a sec before running away as fast as he could, with me and my friends just staring at the blood on the floor and the other kid crying and screaming right next to him. When me and Kevin's eyes met, he looked absolutely effing terrifying, without any emotions in his face and his eyes all black. Then he simply just walked away from the scene and left us all standing there wondering what the hell just happened. This incident didn't help him out that much for obvious reasons, and he later changed schools. We all learned later on that Kevin had been practicing jujitsu/judo or something for all his life, but didn't tell or boasted about it. Lesson learned, don't F with nice people, because when they eventually snap, they'll probably F your crap up. Story 48. The nice guy was me. I decided to start a local basketball team with guys I used to play with as juniors. One of them brought his friend as we needed another sharpshooter. This guy sucked. He'd take anywhere between 10 to 15 three-pointers a game and be lucky to make one. He also had a poor attitude and didn't bother getting back on defense. Typical me, I always stayed quiet and offered encouragement, never criticized anyone. We lost 9 of our first 10 games. The lone win was when he didn't show up because he was sick. Then he came back and we kept losing again. And there was one particular game where we started off horrendously, down 30 at halftime, and he was a big part of the deficit. When the second half started, we got a little more of a spanking, and as the captain, called a quick timeout, and the guy that never gets back on defense complained and yelled at everyone to do just that. My brother, who was our coach, recalled the moment I finally snapped, as he went on to say that to us, I went red as a beetroot, turned my head and said, "Dude, that's you who has to start playing defense and stop taking so many threes, expletive, after being the quiet guy all season." The guy's known for being a huge hothead. He turned around to stare at me and immediately grabbed me by the throat and lost his crap. After about 5 minutes of commotion that followed and finally getting back onto the court, after everyone broke up the fight, we went back onto the court to finally play the last 16 or so minutes, down 30-ish. Long story short, we ended up winning the game with a huge comeback and won by stopping the team from winning it on the last play. We literally turned into the Monstars from Space Jam. People all around the gym were flocking from other games to come and watch ours. He even hugged me after the game with a "you little bastard" comment and a smile from ear to ear, after almost trying to bash the hell out of me 20 minutes before. I'll always remember that. Story 49. In high school, there was this really quiet, timid guy. We'll call him AJ. Him and his best friend are at a mutual acquaintance's house. That guy's parents were out of town, so they were partying and getting drunk. They opened up the gun cabinet and pulled out a .22 rifle that didn't have a trigger on it, so they thought it didn't have any working parts in it. AJ is horseplaying around, sticks in the back of his friend's head, and when he bumped it into his head, it went off and killed him. It was a couple weeks before he was back at school. And then there's this guy we'll call Jake. You listen to really heavy metal, and he thought he was tough and cool because of it. AJ was the office assistant at that time for his co-op class, so he would bring messages to teachers in their classrooms and pick up paperwork. We were in American culture class, and on Fridays, if we did good, we could listen to the radio. The song "Hey Man, Nice Shot" by Filter came on the radio. Right then, AJ walks up to the open classroom door with paperwork for our teacher. Jake is looking away from him and doesn't see him. And then Jake blurts out, "Hey man, nice shot. This song must be about AJ." AJ just dropped the papers out of his hand and ran up and grabbed Jake and yanked him out of his desk by his head, got his leather jacket wrapped over his head, and beat the crap out of him. The teacher was trying to stop it, and we were trying to stop the teacher from stopping it, because none of us liked Jake, really. It ended with the school police officer deflecting a whole desk that AJ threw at Jake's head. As AJ screamed, "Here's a nice shot to your head, female dog," Jake cried like a little female dog, and AJ just started bawling too. We comforted AJ because F Jake, he was an asshole. Story 50. One of my friends in high school was a very nice Chinese-Japanese guy. Let's call him Jack. Jack was the tallest guy I knew. Already hit 180 centimeters when we were only 14. Totally harmless, quiet, and funny when he wanted to be. We had this new kid join our year. He didn't last there very long, and he was a total braggart and just generally kind of a jerk. In retrospect, he probably did it to make himself seem cool so that we would like him, but it backfired in every way. We'll call him John. One day, as we're playing our usual rushed lunch football game on the field, Jack and John were next to each other. Jack and I were playing in defense, and John was playing in goal. We didn't actually see anything happen because Jack was slightly behind me, but I suddenly heard him say, "Oh, did you pinch my ass?" John was very quick to say, "Nah, man, I'm not gay. I wouldn't pinch your ass." Jack called bullcrap because John was the only person behind us, but Jack had an admirable amount of patience. He said, "Don't touch me again, okay?" and let it go. Not more than 2 minutes later, all I hear from my left is, "I said don't touch me!" I turn around just in time to see Jack grab John by the shirt, lift him into the air before slamming him down onto the ground. Another one of my friends, who plays rugby by the way, was trying his level best to pull the much larger Jack away from John. Jack got in a few kicks to the body before picking up John's bag and yeeting that female dog far away. I was just in fear and awe because no one had ever expected any violence from Jack. The nicest guy in my year had just ruined this guy in like a split second. Story 51. My old man. Very calm, quiet guy, all about logic. The man could pass for a Vulcan from Star Trek. It doesn't hurt that he's small kind looks like Leonard Nimoy. There was a cop that was harassing me. I was about 14 at the time, and in some cases I deserved to be harassed, not followed around and bullied by punk with a badge. Now, I want to state unequivocally right now, some of my best friends are police officers. I support the police as an institution, and I understand that sometimes bad apples get in. I will not debate about the police, so don't even try. The harassment culminated in this cop, we'll call him Asshat, running radar in front of parents' house, which sits on a nice steep hill. Perfect for going way too fast on your brand new road bicycle that you worked very hard to buy. I come flying down the hill, as fast as I can spin the pedals in top gear. Asshat lurches out in front of me. I cannot dodge and go tumbling over the hood of his cruiser. My parents, uncle, and neighbor watch this all unfold. Asshat is now throwing me over the hood of his car, bloodied, broken teeth and ribs and all, and slapping handcuffs on me. Only time I've ever been cuffed outside the bedroom. Apparently, me hitting his car while he was trying to pull me over for speeding constituted assaulting an officer and resisting arrest. This didn't sit too well with basically the whole neighborhood, who took to the street with pitchforks and shovels, and I'm not exaggerating, thank God they didn't have torches. They surround the cop while my mother pulls me away. My old man is screaming at the top of his lungs at this cop, and people are holding him back. Long story short, Pops was right. Asshat doesn't work for that county anymore. Story 52. My friend Michael was a Jewish kid in East Tennessee who was reasonably well liked. A little nerdy, but an okay guy. He was a good student and teachers liked him. In 8th grade, this guy, Andrew, would occasionally harass him, flicking him in the ears and calling him Jew. One day, Andrew flicked his ear from the table next to ours at lunch, and Michael looked up at us with a sort of sad look on his face. He said, "If I tell on Andrew, I'm just going to look like a nerd, aren't I?" We sort of nodded our heads. Looking back, we were real a-holes for not standing up, but I don't even think it occurred to us we could collectively do something about it. We assumed Michael would sort of just nod his head and go back to taking it. Instead, Michael stood up quickly and put the very surprised Andrew in a headlock and started pounding the crap out of his face with his fist. Everyone was in shock and nobody even tried to do anything for a good minute, which is how long it took someone to let the principal know, who was the first adult on the scene. He pulled them apart and screamed at Andrew, who was still in shock, to get to his office. He then turned to Michael and said, "I think you'd better go too." He didn't even know what instigated it, but I guess they both had reputations enough that he had a good guess. Michael didn't get in any real trouble, and nobody ever messed with him again. It was a story people told up until we graduated. Story 53. Probably get buried, but my coworker James at work at my last job. Nicest guy, most level-headed person in regards to daily personality. For 7 years I came to work and I could rely on him to be the same jolly person every day. Lots of dad jokes, smiles, giving the middle finger, etc. Just a funny, happy guy. I even became friends with his son closer to my age and started going to the gym with him. One early morning, he shoots his wife and then he goes to bed drunk and sleeps it off, wakes up and sees her on the floor, sets everything on fire, the house, most of the cars, etc. When police and fire arrive, he shoots himself in his truck. He had ammo and guns ready to fight, but just didn't do it, thankfully. No one really knows why he did it, but what is known is that his wife ultimately was discovered to be dead due to smoke inhalation. Don't know if he thought he killed her already or just didn't think there was any other way out if she did survive. He also had called his son, my friend, and tried to lure him over to the house, but he was out of town luckily. No one really knows where it all went wrong, really. Story 54. My ex-boyfriend. We were juniors in high school and had just broken up, but we still loved each other. I had just transferred to his school as well, so he was the only person I knew. He was kind, the type to always stay back and help even when not asked. The kid had permission to do practically whatever the heck he wanted because everyone loved him and he didn't abuse the power. He practically taught some of the classes we were in together. It was math class. I was sitting next to a football star who thought he was all that, and kept touching me and harassing me even after I told him to quit it. I was obviously very uncomfortable with it. Finally, one day, he just won't stop and he starts making comments about me that were unwelcome and had me very uncomfortable and shy. My ex stands up abruptly, the entire class goes quiet, and he looks Bullet straight in the eyes and says in a serious tone, "Don't talk about her like that." It doesn't sound like much, but he had murder written on his face. If Bullet had even dared to talk back or continue harassing me, guaranteed there would have been a fight. My ex would have won, as he wasn't all that bad either, being a soccer star. The entire class was talking for weeks about how they thought my ex was legit going to kill him. The entire room has this chill to it. You could have heard a pin drop. My ex is not a violent person. I've never seen him get into a fight or even get into an argument for the 10 plus years I knew him. But at that moment, he would have thrown away everything to teach Bullet a lesson. I was allowed to move desks to be next to my ex, thankfully, and it was never a problem again. Story 55. My old manager, let's call her Kara, was one of the calmest people I'd ever met. We worked at a children's after-school club together, so she had to be, but her natural sweet nature was a great fit for the place. Anyway, obviously being around children, you have to watch your P's and Q's, and Kara's way of doing this was to replace swear words with a kid-friendly version instead. For example, F became fudge, crap was sugar, and so on and so forth. She became so adapted to doing it that even when there were only staff in the room, she still refused to swear. All around, adorable person and much too good for our crappy-ass company. But anyway, I like to think that every workplace has their own version of Kevin from The Office sitting around effing crap up through their own dumb actions. Our version of this was Jamie. Jamie was highly egotistical and somehow found ways of turning every situation into a tall tale about his life. He was rude, would often drop his own responsibilities on a Kara's plate through just general laziness. Classic Jamie. On this particular day, he had been tasked with counting up how many points each child had earned in the last month. We would give points for good manners, helping each other, etc. It was a bit of a bummer job that nobody really wanted, and Kara had already anticipated that he wouldn't be the best pleased about being tasked with it due to the sheer mediocrity of his performance level. She had a headache, was rammed with things to do herself, and had just finished dealing with an incident in which a child had thrown up in their school bag. Gross, but surprisingly, gross crap like that is not uncommon. She's at the staff desk filing paperwork when Jamie comes over and starts to slip the excuse that he's really rammed and might not fit it in. Title of your mom's sex tape. This sweet-ass, delicate woman drops her paperwork, stares him straight in the face, and whispers, "F off out of my face." Jamie's staring. I'm staring. We're all staring. He starts to stutter and she opens up again and goes, "I said, F out of my face." Seeing this egotistical, jerkhead, lazy butt getting screamed at was highly satisfying, and all the more due to the fact that it had come from the most unlikely sweet source. Jamie left a month or two after that. Totally unrelated reasons, and Kara is now working at a much better company and finally earning her worth, so all worked out well in the end. But I'll never forget how bizarre it felt to see a literal ray of sunshine explode with anger. Story 56. This is a story of myself. I've been a pretty normal and tame dude my whole life. I'm very diplomatic, and I'm definitely not the fighting type. Our story begins with my parents forcing 15-year-old me to go to a summer church camp for a week. Hadn't really been fond of religion my whole life, so this already had me on edge. I go to the camp, and for the most part, things aren't awful. For context, in the next part, I'm an old man at heart. I go to bed early, wake up early, and enjoy peace and quiet. I had just learned that all kids had to stay up till midnight at some camp party thing every night, so I was already pretty bummed about that. After sitting in the corner for a few hours, trying to make everyone disappear in my mind, the party finally ends and we all get sent back to our cabins. Here's where the crap hits the fan. After doing my nightly hygiene rituals, I climb into my bunk and I believe it's lights out. 30 minutes go by and kids are still chatting. I ask everyone to please either take the conversation outside or be quiet, as I'm incredibly tired, as a diplomat would do. 30 minutes later, 2 kids still talking rather loud. I ask once more. Another 30 minutes go by and they're still laughing, joking, and ruining my sleep. I finally outburst with, "I already don't want to effing be at this Jesus crap camp. Can you shut your goddamn mouth?" And then it's quiet for another 30 minutes. Laughing picks back up again, and I leap from the top of my bunk to the laughing kid's bunk across from me and just start effing going ape crap with my fists until the camp counselor barges in and I get sent home. 0 effing regrets. Story 57. One of my math teachers in high school was a genuinely good guy. We'll call him Mr. A. He was a great teacher and did his best to make stuff relatable to kids at different skill levels who had different learning styles. We're talking going out of his way and spending out of pocket to have physical demonstrations for certain geometry concepts, making games for different units we had to learn, and offering incentives for doing well on tests. Well, I went through some crap myself and went from top of the class one year to a remedial class the following because I fell behind on homework. The kids in that class were complete a-holes to Mr. A for no apparent reason. On top of this, Mr. A had diabetes and was struggling to maintain it that year for some reason. This one day, he had a guest lecturer come in to help him explain something about the math we were doing in relation to the Navy. The guest was a woman who was actually in the force, and they started making some really crass comments. Eventually, they concocted a plan, and as a group threw wads of paper at him while his back was turned at the whiteboard, he snapped, started screaming at them, top of his lungs, telling them that the reason they were failing his class and not going to graduate high school was because they cared more about being clowns and treating other people like crap than they did improving their own lives. He snapped a yardstick in half, was throwing their paper wads back at them, and at one point threw a textbook across the room. Mid-screaming, he had some kind of attack from the diabetes and collapsed. Had to be wheeled out of the classroom and everything. I don't know if he was ever reprimanded for it, but the troublemaker kids were moved to another class for the rest of the year. I visited the school a couple years later after graduating and ran into Mr. A. He seemed to be doing well, and I'm glad that it didn't hamper his teaching other kids long term. Story 58. This is the story of how a factory of 800 people lost it. Probably not quite in the way OP intended, but hey. In the late 80s, I did my apprenticeship for a great engineering company, which was in a stressful industry, but pretty much everyone there had been employed for a long time, as it was a great team. The company that owned our company decided to sell it to a Japanese company in the late 90s, and there was a transition period where we worked closely with the Japanese buyers. Some of the directors were unhappy about this and left, and a new MD was employed who was a bastard, and employed obviously to make cuts into the costs. He was the type of guy that just bullied everyone, and we soon learned not to speak to him after lunch, as he would go to a pub at lunchtime and just get really nasty. This brings us to Naval. Naval was physically disabled and struggled to walk and communicate. A lovely little gray-haired wiry guy. He had been at the company for as long as anyone could remember and was in his early 60s. His job was to remove cardboard packaging from the lines where we had parts delivered, take it to the compactor, and bale it up ready for recycling. And he did this perfectly, with never a concern or bad word made against him. And considering his ability, he was probably the hardest working guy in the factory. He was a funny, genuinely lovely guy, but everyone was aware he was struggling more and more, and he had mentioned retiring on more than one occasion, and due to his long service, he had a decent pension. The new MD became aware there was some cost to be saved, and we became aware he had made Naval redundant. It got quite nasty. Unions were involved. Naval was found once in tears on the shop floor, and I'm not sure how it would reduce the pension Naval would have got. There may have been some performance bullcrap used. Naval's leaving date was decided, and it was decided to have a whip around to buy Naval a leaving gift. Over 3,000 euros was raised, the most money anyone had heard of for leaving a gift. Naval loved music, so it was decided to buy him a hi-fi system. It was a top-of-the-range Denon system in gold finish with speakers so good, the make sounded like they were made by a law firm. You know what I mean. Come to Naval's last day, management was asked if the whole factory could go to his presentation. This was flatly refused. This diktat was roundly ignored. So come 3 p.m., the entire workforce stopped. The car park filled up with people from the late and night shift, and everyone filed into the warehouse, completely filling it. The warehouse guys had constructed a small stage out of pallets. Naval's manager gave a lovely little speech thanking him, and Naval, wrecked with emotion, struggled but gave a speech saying how much he loved everyone and told some funny stories about his time there. By the time the hi-fi was presented, there wasn't a dry eye in the house. And I'm not ashamed to say, me included. The hi-fi was presented to Neville, who was amazed and held it over his head like a boxer winning the heavyweight title. There was a massive round of applause. At that exact moment, the door to the warehouse, which was up a small flight of steps, opened and the MD stepped through, obviously wondering where all the employees were. The entire room stopped clapping instantly and just stared at him. For a second, he looked like he was going to say something, or even go back through the door, but he was kind of committed. So, to complete silence, he walked down the metal steps, each footstep echoing through the silent room. Everyone stared at him, and you could feel the hate from every single person in the room. As he reached the bottom of the steps, the crowd parted to the door opposite, and he walked, eyes straight ahead, across the whole warehouse, the eyes of everyone in the room burning into him. After interminable seconds, he was about 3/4 of the way across the room, and one person, just one, said in a loud, clear, hateful, menacing voice, "You effing wanker!" The MD stopped, looked for a second like he was about to turn, thought better of it, and carried on across the silent room before leaving through the door. The entire crowd lost it, cheering, clapping, hollering, etc. Goodbyes were said to Neville, and most people followed him out to the colleague that was going to take him home, and he was sent away like a conquering hero. The next day there was an inquiry to find out who had shouted, and everyone said it was them. Proper Spartacus crap. A rebuke was sent out to the managers, who dutifully read it to their staff before symbolically screwed it up and threw it into the bin. I left the company a few months later for unrelated reasons, but this story will stay with me forever. Story 59. In my experience, when a nice person finally snaps, it's never a good thing. It can escalate into a serious situation quickly because this person usually has a lot of previous built-up anger they've kept inside because they're too nice and allow people to walk all over them sometimes. Once they snap, the previous and current anger they're experiencing all blow up at once, and anything can happen. Personally, in my situation, I'm the overly nice person, so usually when I snap, I get so angry that I usually end up throwing and slamming things around, sometimes breaking things. Luckily, it never gets to the point where I'd ever think about hurting another person. That ties in with self-control along with other internal battles. However, unfortunately, I would imagine others could lead to more serious situations and/or altercations. Also, just a side note, we should all remember to be a little nicer to those around us, especially in today's world. You never know other people's internal battles and wouldn't want to unintentionally set someone off just for being the person who pushed them over the edge. Story 60. Knew a guy, call him X. He was known to his mates as the nicest guy and would always try to help out everyone. Didn't give two craps about money and would help out there if needed. Shared all his stuff. In the house he lived in, would just do some of the grunt work without being asked, etc., etc. The ladies seemed to like his non-threateningness? Words? So he would be the shoulder to cry on when they fell down. He was the sort of person who actually felt bad if he couldn't help someone, even if it was out of his control. An actual nice guy that also seemed to know the nice guy tropes and tended to avoid them. What basically caused the snap was people kind of taking advantage of this over and over again, and I saw it coming but couldn't stop them taking advantage of him. The housemates started basically just leaving stuff to be done because Axel sorted, he's so nice, even when he would bring it up next week and say maybe someone should do something. Same thing, always left for him. Getting meals, X would pay under the idea of a round system, that he would get food or drinks and then someone else would later. Never officially tracked, but again, people took advantage. Would pay for 1 in 5, but he only realized at the end of the month. He was single and the girls knew about this. They always knew he was not happy since he wasn't lucky in relationships. But the shoulder to cry on moved from bit stressed about work to, I wish I could find a boyfriend like you, and of course complaining about said boyfriend, while getting him to do basically all the relationship things without being in a relationship, relying far too much on him. It was like he had multiple girlfriends without the fun stuff. I even saw him telling and hinting the girls that he was a bit uncomfortable about this talk, due to his own situation sucking and kinda not wanting to take on more relationship stuff that wasn't his. One of the girls would complain to him because, quote, if I complain to my BF, he'll think I'm crazy. But it carried on so he couldn't distance from the situation. One of the girls ended up full on flirting with him to make matters worse, sitting on laps, etc., etc., having meals with him, but then complaining about the guy she was maybe going to see. It was always. He was always mentioning having his own issues, but rarely was help provided by them. More take than give. Tried to get him to back away from it all and give himself some space. But I mostly tried to get the housemates and the friends to sort out their own stuff and stop lumping it all on him. To stop taking advantage of the kindness since they were relying too much on it when he made it clear he can only do so much and he wasn't happy with the whole situation. He ended up walking in front of a bus. Story 61. Friend of mine in middle school is this very intelligent, quiet until you get to know him kind of kid. He was on the short side, not remotely athletic. He was super competitive and did well in all his classes. In 8th grade, we got a new English teacher who hated all the competitive kids, including me and my friend. She introduced a new grading system pretty much just to F us over. Her son, who was in her class by some miracle, was her own personal mole and would rat out every minor thing he caught someone doing. He would also make fun of all the people that didn't get the grade they wanted, as he always got good grades, because he was the teacher's son. Eventually, my friend is complaining about his grade on the midterm essay, which brought his grade down from a 91 to an 89. The first B he had ever finished a class with. Teacher's son is making fun of him for it, and he snaps. He grabs his binder and swings it at the kid's head, knocking him over. He then stomps on the kid's nose, breaking it. The teacher obviously tries to stop this, so he pushes the teacher, storms over to her desk, and breaks her MacBook over his knee. Then he shouts, "Have fun effing me over now. Can't grade anybody now, can you, stupid female dog?" and reports himself to the principal's office. Well, at least he had the decency to turn himself in, right? Yeah, maybe he didn't get in trouble. Let's reward this guy's honesty. He's only human. Story 62. One of my neighbors, a super chill guy from a working class family, always helpful and always laughing, and almost everybody liked him. But there were those who looked down on him as if he was a jester. Some group thought it would be amusing to hassle his 16-year-old sister, and when she retorted, they got physical with her. They stripped her, unclothed, and beaten her until she started choking on her own blood. They were about to essay her when a passerby stumbled upon them and they bolted. The passerby's statement was not taken into account as he was drunk, and the families of those guys got angry for daring to defy them. And that's when my friend snapped. One night, he went to one family after the other, beat the crap out of the parents, and then maimed the guys for life. Like put a large stone in one guy's mouth and then hit it with a bat, shattering the jaw. As for the main guy, cut off his balls and fed one each to his parents. He was arrested but got a reduced sentence as he was declared to have suffered a temporary bout of insanity while those families left. After he returned, there was no charge in his personality. So after a few years, I asked him about the insanity, and he had this rakish grin on his face. Touché, my friend, touché. Story 63. Guy on my first ship, ex-Navy. He was generally a pretty cool guy, fun to hang out with at work and at the bar. Always willing to lend a hand with maintenance and stuff, and so on. Real solid worker, too. He was probably going places in life. We had a chief at the time that was a real a-hole. Smug, smarmy, a bully, a real stickler for the rules as long as he could use them to get one of his workers in trouble, and was universally despised. Morale was at zero, and if he could have found a way to make it negative, he would have. I carpooled with our good guy, and he was having a rough time one morning. He went out to drop the trash in the outside trash can, and his dog bolted out after a squirrel. He finally caught the dog, and the door had swung shut and locked him out. He then broke into his house, changed into his working uniform, and left to pick me up. I get in, and his gas light comes on. Apparently, one of his neighbors had stolen gas from his car, since he had a quarter tank the night before. We stop at the next gas station, and as he's getting gas, some random chief from another department takes it upon himself to remind him you can't stop for gas in your working uniform. "Shipmate, you can't do that." He ignores him and grumbles a little. "Shipmate?" Same response. "Shipmate!" and grabs him by the shoulder to turn him around. Good guy explodes. He cold clocks random chief, then chases him across the parking lot to his car, then tries to punch him in the side window as random chief tries to drive off. Random chief finally gets away, and good guy without a word just turns and walks home. I'm just sitting there in the passenger seat like, well, now what do I do? Of course he gets in big trouble for it, and eventually ended up getting separated for psychiatric problems after a couple more rage incidents. The constant stress and negativity at work just ate him up inside, and he finally reached his breaking point that day. Story 64. I work with the nicest girl ever. I ended up adding her on Facebook, and she's actually totally normal, not some quiet weirdo. She played field hockey and likes camping, but she's just the type of extreme quiet you'd think was a serial killer. She just doesn't have crap to say to us at work. Anyways, we struggle to hire people. Believe it or not, most people don't want to make minimum wage and bust their asses with some nasty and potentially dangerous situations in a kennel, so we kind of hire whoever is available. So when I started back to school and couldn't work, they hired this girl to fill my spot who is very abrasive, let alone she thinks she is Jesus because she works at an animal shelter. That's how you can tell the a-holes, the people who are holier than thou because they work at basically a charity job and love to tell you about it. Anyways, one morning as we're busting our asses and cleaning up the mess, the whiny girl left the night before and dealing with some illnesses going around the kennel, she walks in and instead of getting to work and helping, starts going on a rant about how there's dirty dishes in the sink and quote, you know those cats in the hallway haven't been cleaned yet and there's dogs outside. Quiet girl that usually says a maximum of 10 words in a morning goes, Katie, shut the F up, and then just goes back to taking care of her cats and finishing cleaning up. Katie got the F out of there to go complain to the managers, and the other two of us were just dying laughing and cheering for Quiet Girl. She didn't say another word, but you could tell she was just trying to control a smirk for the rest of the morning as we were finishing up. Greatest thing ever. Story 65. I think I would consider myself a nice guy, more back in middle school compared to now at the least. In middle school, I wasn't exactly popular or unpopular, but probably below the average. I would get verbal crap spat at me from time to time, but it was nothing I couldn't handle. One time, near like the last 2 weeks before my 8th grade year was over, I was playing basketball outside with about 9 or so other friends. We were playing full court, so 2 hoops instead of just 1. This other group of kids, who were known as the rich snotty a-holes, shouted at us saying we were using their half court, but we ignored them. At one point, I got the ball and was about to shoot it, until one of them went up to me and grabbed it out of my hands. I was obviously annoyed and asked him to give it back, but instead he dropped the ball and punched me in the chest. What him and not many people knew at the time was I was about 7 years in training for Taekwondo, so when he punched me, it just triggered some sort of reflex and I just jabbed him in the face. I didn't mean for it to be anything strong, but my 14-year-old self probably didn't understand that training. To literally punch for 7 years would make a difference. In the aftermath, the teachers outside explained that the punch sounded like an open hand smack. The kid ended up having a dislocated jaw and had to get his braces redone because they were stuck in his lip. I was sent home for the day, and then the next day I meet with the assistant principal, who I told what happened to. Apparently, the kid also told him the truth, which I can respect. So we both ended up with a week of in-school suspension, and I ended up with a lecture, saying from him, explaining, please aim for the chest next time. In 12th grade, we ended up having a cooking class together, and he was in my group, and we became good friends, so in the end, it worked out. Story 66. Me. I generally am quite a quiet person. I have cystic fibrosis, so spend months in hospital at a time. I always make sure to say my please and thank yous and how are you to everyone from cleaners to doctors because I think politeness is a basic human right. I always see student directors and I always wait when they're busy or sometimes even turn off my call button if I know they're crazy busy because I don't want to be a bother. One evening at about midnight, I was having a serious hypo of 2.6, and anyone that's had a hypo knows you can't even stand or think straight. I had Lucozade to help, but my hands weren't working to get the lid off. It's the only time I've ever pressed my buzzer for a nurse to help with something so minor, but I needed him to open it for me. I buzzed, he came in, and I explained I was having a hypo and needed help. He was annoyed and opened the bottle and left. I started panicking. Normally, when you have a hypo, the nurse will stay with you to help, but he just left. So I ended up on the floor by my food cupboard, frantically eating anything sweet to try and get my blood sugar up. I then fell asleep, exhausted from the hypo, and he returned at 3 a.m., 3 hours later to check my blood sugar. I told my doctors in the morning what had happened and spoke to the nurse the next day, who informed me he hadn't even written in the notes that I had a hypo and asked for help. So I requested the ward manager as I didn't want him anywhere near me. I didn't trust him. I wait patiently for 3 days for the ward manager to come see me. By the 3rd day, I was angry she hadn't come. I was walking back to the unit with a friend who I had told about the incident and explained how I was scared he now couldn't take care of me properly. Then I saw him in the treatment room, and I freaked. I started crying. This man literally could have made me lose my life, and he was drawing up IVs. I exploded at him. He told me he hadn't been spoken to by the ward manager, and as we were arguing, he told me he had, so not only had he effed up big time, he was now lying. As it for more heated, he was sent off the ward. The manager came to see me the next day, and I listened to what he had told her. He told her I called him, and he opened the bottle and asked if I needed anything else before leaving. He hadn't. So instead of owning up to his mistake, he lied. She said he wanted to come and apologize. I refused. If he hadn't have lied, I would have listened to him, but the fact that he lied made me realize he couldn't be trusted. So from that point on, he was never allowed to work CF side while I was on the unit again. That was the only time I'd ever exploded like that, and they knew it wasn't like me. Ever. I haven't seen him since. I don't feel bad. He left me in a dangerous and vulnerable position, and I would do it again. Since then, their hypo-awareness has been amazing. Story 67. Before I start, this is going to need some context. See, at least where I went to school, cliques were very much a thing when it came to lunch. Every table was occupied with a couple kids, sometimes a dozen spread out over two, and each of them sat there because they were like one another. We had jocks, metalheads, cheerleaders, and my group, the nerds. For a half hour, all we'd do is play Yu-Gi-Oh! Or be on our handheld game consoles and be our nerdiest selves, and no one would ever bother us. Unlike TV or movies, however, we each had a guardian, one unofficial guy or girl that would keep our clique safe from intrusion or bullying. It was pretty easy to tell who this guardian was. Some of them were absolute monsters in terms of size, and others still carried knives and stuff to make up for a lack of bulk. But there was one that had neither, and this is where our story begins. The nice guy I knew was that one guardian. He was perfectly normal from the look of him, maybe a hair under 6 feet tall, so definitely a bit bigger than us, but not compared to some at lunch. I don't exactly know how he got into our group. I think one of the older guys said he was cool and that he could stick around. Seniority ruled who was let in beyond even a guardian, so we decided why not. This guardian, let's call him David, was very quiet. He never spoke and always watched us, always paid attention. Come to think of it, he might have been on the spectrum. Regardless, David was actually pretty cool. He had a DS, so we'd play Smash or Mario Kart together, and he was absolutely unbeatable at card games. He'd smile, chuckle, even get a little irritated when he'd lose a game, but was always so passive at everything. Even when we tried to get closer by cracking a joke or asking about who he was, he'd shut us out. Not totally reject us, just smile and nod and say nothing, or shrug like he didn't know. Kinda creepy, actually. The day he became a guardian was when one of the jocks, he'll be Michael, tried to mess with us for a couple weeks, called us a bunch of nerds, screwed with our cards by swirling them around, even harassed one girl that stuck around. We hated this guy, but didn't really have a guardian yet because the last one graduated the year before, so there really wasn't much we could do. I almost got up and did something, but David knew I'd just get my ass beat, so he stopped me. One hand on my arm, and he stopped me dead in my tracks like I weighed nothing. His grip was like iron, so I couldn't move, and when I tried to tell him off, he just stared at me. That presence, that stare, like I was a rabbit and I had just come face to face with a very hungry beast. I felt like if I didn't listen, something very bad was going to happen to me, and it wasn't going to come from the jock. Now, I'm not exactly the bravest person on the planet, nor am I the strongest. I've been bullied my whole life, so I know what it's like to be powerless, but this was a brand new kind of fear. Michael saw this and started calling David out for it. Made a big fuss, too, and got a couple surrounding tables to pay attention. Come on, a-hole, let the craphead get his teeth kicked in, or do you want to do something about it? You feeling like hot crap, too? He started getting into our buddy's face, shoved his arm, flicked his nose, shouted into his ear, the whole 9 yards, and David didn't move a muscle, just took it, all while looking right at me. Michael must have gotten annoyed, so he slapped him, right in his cheek, made a loud sound, and definitely felt like it would have hurt. But our guardian-to-be didn't even flinch. Then he held up a finger. You got one more. Make it count. The entire table froze. This was the first time he had ever said anything. None of us even knew what he sounded like. His voice was perfectly normal, but the intent and inflection behind it was jarring. Not so much a warning as it was a statement of fact. An invitation to keep going. One Michael should have turned down. Stupid son of a female dog. Do something. He shoved David again, obviously not getting the hint. That's when he finally looked at the jock. It felt like a massive weight was taken off my shoulders, clearly transforming to Michael. For the first time, their eyes met, and the confidence that had been showing the whole time started to crack. David continued holding up his finger while boring 2 holes into this guy's skull. Ever the idiot, the bullying escalated. All right, effer, 1 hit. With that, the jock swung with everything he had and cracked our guardian in the eye. The sound was like a water balloon popping, and David took it. Reacted, sure, but that hit would have knocked anybody out. Before Michael could even react, David was moving, and within moments, I thought our bully was dead. I lost count after the first 5 seconds, but I know for sure that at least 15 punches were thrown, and maybe 3 of them were from Michael. David completely dismantled him like he was a training dummy, circling from back to front to back again and looking like Bruce Lee himself possessed this guy and fought for him. The jock didn't even go down until the fight was broken up. He never passed out, never fell over, only screamed and swung and missed. Our guardian never once went for a headshot, never once tried to knock the bully out. Every single hit was surgical. He made sure Michael felt every last one before he was eventually pulled off by the police officer that was called from the office. But that wasn't until about a minute later. David wasn't just punching either. He'd throw kicks and slaps and knees to a very painful degree. We thought David was going to kill Michael. The end result was 3 cracked ribs, a ruptured liver, sprained wrist, dislocated knee, collapsed trachea, broken foot, and tons of internal and external bruising. Michael looked like he'd been hit by a car when he was taken to the nurse, and David was completely stone-faced the entire time. Didn't even look like he was breathing hard. By some absolute miracle, he wasn't expelled. I think the explanation was something along the lines of Michael didn't go unconscious, so David was still completely within his rights to defend himself. Didn't stop the bully's parent from getting upset. His mom wanted to press charges, but couldn't because Michael was the instigator and struck first. He had no defense. In the end, David got a 2-week suspension, and once he came back, no one from the other table so much as looked at him for the rest of the time he was at school. Michael took about as long to come back, but boy were the tables turned. He was bullied and harassed so hard he didn't even eat lunch in the lunchroom anymore. I'm pretty sure he eventually switched schools. For the last 2 years of high school, everyone was terrified of David, but all he'd do is smile and stay quiet. A guardian for the rest of his days. Story 68. I had a college lecturer who was a softly spoken, polite guy. He was also a very patient man who always did his best for his students. We'll call him Eric. We had a middle-aged lady in our class that was rude and came across as entitled, sometimes acted like a brat if she didn't get her way. We'll call her ES, entitled student. Names have been changed for privacy reasons. A little background about ES. She joined midway through a 2-year course that almost immediately showed everyone how much of a pain in the backside she was. I think only a few of us tolerated her, including me, but I made no effort in being buddy-buddy with her. She came across as someone I wouldn't want to associate myself with. Well, one day we were in a science lab for a class, and the topic of assignments, I believe, not 100% sure as this was around 10 years ago, came up, and ES started debating with my lecturer in her usual bratty, entitled way, going as far as to talk over him and dismiss what he was saying, even though he was just following what was required of him as a lecturer. I don't know the history between Eric and ES, but I could only assume that she had been grinding on his nerves over the past year, as he snapped by shouting, "ES!" His usual friendly demeanor changed to this intense expression that looked genuinely scary, which took everyone, especially ES, completely off guard. He went on to rant about the amount of time and effort he's put in order to organize classes, trips, activities, etc., even staying up at nights and over the weekends, while stating that he has no desire for sympathy, but understanding of his predicament and that he wouldn't tolerate being spoken down to or belittled for doing his best. ES deflated and slumped in her stool, even pulling her phone out to text someone, possibly her husband, to which Eric calmly stated, "I also don't appreciate it when students text during my class," so she tossed her phone onto the desk and huffed. After the class had finished, she quickly left the room with her head looking down at the ground, and other students, some of which were also in their 30s/middle-aged, walked up to Eric and attempted to shake his hand for putting her in her place. He politely refused, as he believed it would have been unprofessional of him to accept that sort of praise. From what I can recall, she kept to herself mostly afterward, but would occasionally pipe up with some statement in a class that would make everyone's eyes roll. Story 69. I have a really good friend named D. I consider him one of my best friends. Now, D is the sweetest person in the world, like helping old ladies cross the street, give whatever he has on hand to homeless people, volunteers at animal shelters type of sweet. Soft-spoken, kinda tall, around 6 foot something, but he slouches to talk to shorties like me. I'm 5'1", so we look funny when we hang out. Super chill, super zen, he's unreal. I love that dude so much. D had a boyfriend. One day, his boyfriend at the time cheated on him. Cheater gaslights D, saying that he is making things up in his head, that D was reading too much into Cheater's friendship, and D was so in love with Cheater that he accepted it and admitted he overreacted. More evidence pops up that Cheater is cheating and doesn't seem to be stopping. D confronts him by calmly asking for an explanation. D never yells, ever. Cheater once again says that D's overreacting and that D doesn't trust him, blah blah blah. Cheater throws a tantrum, smashed D's brand new switch against the wall, which created a hole and broke the switch, and stormed out of their apartment. Afterward, D called me crying, which shocked me because D is the chillest dude ever, saying that he wasn't sure what was real anymore and maybe he was the toxic one in the relationship and he was going crazy or something. I didn't know the intimate details of their relationship at the time, so even though my gut said that D was the innocent one, I didn't want to side with anyone without knowing the full story because Cheater was also one of my friends at the time. Instead, I calmly guided him through all the accumulated evidence and his suspicions. By the end, I agreed that Cheater was overstepping bounds with this other person and most likely cheating. I suggested a breakup more due to the violent reaction that Cheater had when confronted rather than if he actually cheated or not. D was really hesitant because he was still in love and they had been dating for almost 4 years. He decides to stay with his parents that night to cool down and sleep. I go to a small house party the same night with another friend. I was the plus one, and I don't really know anyone there. Everyone is fine, and I stick with my friend for most of the night. Eventually, I decide to head home, and as I'm walking towards my car, I see Cheater making out with another person in a parked car. Turns out that the other person Cheater was cheating on was neighbors with the host of the party I went to, and I caught them red-handed. It was like some cheesy drama. I'm sitting in my car fuming and decide to call up D, explaining what I just witnessed. D seems calm and basically tells me to come pick him up at his parents' house. He doesn't drive. So I do, and he's waiting for me in his pajamas and an empty backpack. He tells me to go back to their apartment so he can pick up his stuff. It's like almost midnight at this point. During the entire ride, D is very quiet. We make it to his place and start loading all his things into my car. Around 2 or 3 a.m., Cheater comes home and sees what we're doing and flips out, saying that I was enabling D in his fantasies and maybe we were secretly together and this was just an excuse to get rid of him. Starts calling me awful names. He pushes me. Something in D snapped and he grabbed a pan and hit Cheater in the head. It doesn't knock out Cheater, but he does tumble down. There's like a moment of shock for everyone, including D, because he's not a violent person. Cheater gets up and basically tackles D. D covers his face while I try to pull Cheater off of him, which I can't because I'm scrawny as hell, and D eventually reacts, takes a huge swing and breaks Cheater's nose. We bail and I take D back to his parents' house and he just breaks down and starts hysterically crying when we park in the driveway. Seeing your kind, sweet friend just break down like that really crushes you, man. It's been a year and some change now, and he's doing much better. Thriving, got a new Switch, doing great in college, and saving up for a car. I'm proud of him, lol. Cheater's nose is now forever crooked. Story 70. Working in a bar. Previous work experience in hospitality was supervisor/manager level, but in this new bar job, I wanted no responsibility to be able to focus on my own well-being. Restaurant manager decides to okay a supervisor to go on hollybobs for 4 months. Asks me to step up and keep the bar organized while they're away, no pay raise, all for minimum wage. I suddenly am in charge of stock take, stock count, orders, running of the shifts, and managers would check rotas with myself before publishing to ensure a smooth shift pattern for everyone during the week. Supervisor came back from holiday, complained I overstepped my mark when I showed her that I had changed around the bar to make things smoother, simply speed rails and where stock was kept. The same restaurant manager who asked me to do these things then gives me a disciplinary due to the complaint. In the recorded disciplinary, I state that he told me to do these things, and from now on, I shall do exactly as my bartender peers are doing. Simply work shifts, refuse to stay on shift extra to help if it's busy, and refuse any extra responsibilities that were not pertinent to my job. Basically do what every other red shirt was doing that hadn't received such comments. Several weeks later, I received another disciplinary from the same restaurant manager, this time informing me my work ethic had dropped significantly. I suggested that I use my holidays to take a break for a few weeks, just as the supervisors had done for months. The manager agreed on the spot for my 2 weeks of holidays starting from the following day. As soon as we shook hands in agreement to the holidays, I handed him my 2 weeks' notice and explained to him that any man who's blind to and who doesn't respect my work ethic doesn't deserve it. I'm happily in university now, no longer working in that god-awful meat grinder of a trade. Story 71. I'm the nice teacher. In reality, that's pretty much expected, since I'm 5'2", scrawny looking, and still in uni finishing my studies while doing substituting on the side. I love my students. I always speak to them with respect and make a point of helping the special needs kids. The kind of teacher that let the kid with anger management issues stay inside during recess, aka my break, and do a puzzle and vent about their home life instead of demolishing a kid's face. Then early in my substituting days came a class of second graders, 7-year-olds, in a portable. Not all of them were spoiled little craps, but most did their best to rock my crap. Threw stuff, yelled, didn't listen, broke rules. I was still new to the job and doing my damn best. About 1 hour before the end of the day, I finally started having a panic attack and knew I'd had enough. I calmed myself, closed the lights for attention, looked them in the eye, and lost my goddamn crap. I didn't verbally abuse them, but it was my first time using the booming voice. Do I look happy right now? Is this what you guys want? Because this is where we're getting to. Thank you to all the guys who've listened today. I cannot say the same for the rest of you. I may not be your teacher, but I am a teacher, and like it or not, I will not have this. We work as a team to make today work. I've not seen teamwork until now. My patience is at 0, and I've had a lot of it. This is changing now, understood? Nobody would look at me in the eye after that, except for the couple kids who thanked me after. This straight up made me such a better teacher. Story 72. The ground where I used to live was clay-like, so when it got wet, you'd be able to pick up clumps of the stuff and throw it like a snowball. One evening, a bunch of us had gone to play football at our local park. We're all about 12 or 13 at this point. After school, and after a few hours of playing, we decided to pack it in and go home as we were all caked in mud, and it was starting to get dark. 4 of my friends decided to have a mud fight, and it ended up 3-on-1 with the one guy getting a bit pelted. Eventually, he'd had enough and told them to stop, last warning, etc., which predictably had no effect. He gave one last warning, and one of the guys launched a smallish mud ball at him that caught him square in the forehead. All 3 were stood in the goal at this point, and the friend who had thrown the last ball was leaning against one of the goalposts. Now, this guy was normally a pretty chill person, never lost his temper, was genuinely a nice kid. NK. But apparently he had another side to him. He bent down, undid both football boots, asked right boot or left boot, to which the friend laughed and said, right. So NK leans back and from all of 10 meters launches the right boot as hard as he can at the kid's head. Thankfully it hits the metal goalpost next to the kid's head, which rang out with a massive clang as it had hit studs first. Cue some nervous laughter from the other 3 saying, ha, I guess you didn't mean that. To which he replied, actually he did, and his aim was just off. The 3 then leg it, which turns into some Benny Hill crap with NK chasing them around with the remaining boot, threatening to beat the crap out of them. Found out later that the combination of having no boots on and running around in cold wet grass/mud had actually calmed him down, but he thought scaring the crap out of his mates was funny enough to keep the charade up for a few more minutes.